There we go. Jim Geither.
Thank you. Okay. I have a real simple question. Back to Peyer's patches. You got healing in your Peyer's patches by having a healing crisis come on you, having a healing fever come on you. Is there any way that somebody can initiate that to go through that a little bit faster? For Brooke here, I'm asking the question basically.
I don't know about that. I do think that a lot of people, if I can be very honest about my observation, a lot of people think, well, a little bit's going to be good for me, so a lot's going to be better. But like taking too many minerals, perhaps taking too much B complex, taking too much flax oil, or any of these other type of, or even the enzymes, it can throw off the chemistry sometimes in the body and cause us to hallucinate and cause us to have lots of problems for a while until we can cut back down to a normal, solid program, which I would definitely prefer, rather than taking massive amounts of nutrients over an extended period of time. I think it will have detrimental effects. This is why I recommend that once you get something under control, take a break from it for a week. Give the body a chance to heal naturally without being forced continually to detoxify.
Now, can one, when one does body electronics, do at the same time a program for cancer patients, for example, like Hulda Clark? Can one do that at the same time?
Now, Hulda Clark is a very exceptional lady in her program. And she has a very, very good parasite cleansing program. But are there enzymes with that program? Are there minerals with that program? Is there flax oil with that program? Is there B complex with that program? Is there amino acids with that program? No, but there is a parasite cleansing program. And that could be definitely incorporated with the program that we have with no harmful side effects whatsoever. In fact, probably it would be beneficial. Okay? Now, pardon? Hold on.
I feel what's beneficial with her program, as well as the parasite cleanse, is looking at all the chemicals that we put into our bodies and the sources of them. I mean, she goes very deeply into that.
We have one person here in Australia now that's been overtraining with Hulda Clark for several months. What's her name? Delwyn English from Sydney. And Delwyn English had been there for quite some time and had come back, and she's fully trained in Hulda Clark's technology and techniques. And so this is one lady that has a good knowledge in that particular area. She was trained last year here at the seminar for body electronics and made some very, very wonderful progress. And so the more different, shall we say, tools that you have in your kit of good trade here, I think this is what you should look at. The more tools you have, the better off you're going to be. Okay, Doug.
Okay, next.
Lights.
Okay, next slide, Matthew. Okay, I guess we still got another kidney right there. See the lesion and the spread out fibers all down through the kidney area. Note the thicker mucoprotein all along the 0-degree reflex right out in here.
That's very important. Put that down, show that.
You'll note if you swing around in the zone 6 that this would be about the area where you'd have the worst mucoprotein in the entire eye in zone 6, and it exactly corresponds to this kidney adrenal area, this right here. And actually, if you follow it in, you'll see some little rust spots and so forth, and quite a big dent into the autonomic nerve wreath right there as well. So you got all sorts of stuff along that 0-degree reflex.
Okay, go 180-degree reflex. Now, if you take a look at that in the brain area, what do you have in the brain area in that particular location? What? Hallucinations, do you see where HAL is there? And obsessions, do you see that? Look at, put the lights on. Okay, look at your chart right there. Do you see that? Now, sometimes people who have healing on their kidneys and in their adrenal area go right across 180 degrees, and what do you have? You see where it says HAL? Hallucinations. You see where it says OBS? That's obsessions. Now, the obsessions is where a person has something on their mind, they can't get it off their mind until it's done. And even then, they still think about it. But a hallucination is where lots of times when you have kidney and adrenal disorders, you'll have real good hallucinations at this point. You got that? No. Who says no? Okay, look at the kidney, adrenal area, and go right across 180 degrees. You see on the chart where it says small and HAL and OBS. Okay, you got it. Next slide.
Lights in a door, please. I suppose you got some stuff in the kidney area, or possibly over into the gonads right in here. If you sweep around this eye, you'll notice that it's quite a bit darker all up in this area where you have a lot of spread fibers, and that's going to be up in your lung area all through there. And you'll notice some pretty aberrant fiber structures right in through this whole area here, a lot of little holes in between the fibers and spread fibers, and that's really your whole lung area. Now you've got some bizarre stuff down in this area as well, in through the chest, and some of the asparagus. I believe that's asparagus right in that area as well, down through the rib and the chest and breast area. You follow that in, and you've got some dark areas right in here. You follow this in, and it looks like you got a doubling of the autonomic nerve wreath all along through that area. Yeah, you probably have a transversal right in this area, about 4 o'clock or so.
Look right at 6 o'clock, which would go to the adrenal kidney area.
Right in through here, you're probably dealing with the adrenal kidney, as John says.
And that goes right back to a problem there in the where, Doug? Look at the color change.
It looks, yeah, you've got to, if you sweep around this way, you definitely got a different color right in through here in the sigmoid colon that's going to reflex out.
Now, when you have color of that kind in the sigmoid colon just before the rectum, oftentimes that will be a pinworm manifestation. A pinworm, especially when the color is pretty well limited to the first and second zones around the eye, which you have in this case. You'll find it in the rectal area, and you'll have discolorations there because the toxins will settle out in the tissue of greatest weakness. Now, the pinworms will come out during the full moon, actually 3 days, roughly, right around full moon, to lay their eggs. You can take a little piece of tape and just kind of put it across the anus there when everything comes out and starts itching, and you can pick up the pinworms and the eggs and take a look at them under a microscope. But this is where you're going to have to go on a good parasite cleansing program to take care of that pinworms, and a good Schweitzer implant rectally would be very advisable. But you see people itching their anus, but that'll happen usually during the full moon. During that time, it's usually an indication of a pinworm manifestation in their sigmoid colon.
Okay, next slide. Okay, you're going to have a pigment spot right in this area that's going to be out in the lung area. You can all see that. It's going to be a left eye here, so that's going to be right in exactly where the lung area is going to be on the chart right here. Okay, next slide. Okay, if you look right in, we've got ourselves a right eye, and well, actually, you probably want to take care of the adrenals and the cecum right in this area where you can see this pigmentation. And it's a bit dark out in through here into the lung area and the chest area.
Now, Doug, on this one here, this is a young man that has a poliomyelitis. And in his right leg, it's all shriveled up. Mm-hmm. And you see the pigmentation going down there.
Yeah.
Now with polio, my older brother was a naturopathic physician and a chiropractor. And he was about 10 years older than myself. And after his training in medical school, he then became a chiropractor and a naturopath. And he went down to San Francisco Bay Area and worked with a team of 4 other like-minded practitioners. And they had the audacity to work on polio cases where they had been diagnosed with polio, where for the rest of their life that person would be in an iron lung or possibly in braces, certainly not being able to walk normally because of the activity of the polio on the muscles of the legs. Now he would take, and they would give colonic therapy, massage work, manipulation work, and nutritional factors, and after about a week to 2 weeks, the person would be back totally normal with absolutely no signs of polio. The medical people would then say they must have diagnosed the case incorrectly. But all the diagnosed cases, they worked tremendously at taking care of their patients. Now, my brother was the first one to give me one of Dr. Jensen's book. Not the one we have here, it's the first edition. But to point out right here in the cecum area, do you see the cecum, that discoloration here? That has to be cleaned out first before the leg will heal. So you need to work directly on that cecum area, work and clean out the cecum with good colonic therapy and a good cleansing program before the leg will heal and regenerate.
You've also got quite a transversal here that I think most of you can probably see. Is that, you can see the pink color right in this area. Can you all see that? Okay. All right, next slide. Oh, there we go. We've got a pigment spot right in the lung area up there. You'll note a very, very heavy scirphragm as well, but can you all see that brown pigment spot right in that area in the lung?
That's it.
Yeah.
That's cancer of the lung, and that's all there is.
Okay, next slide. Okay, again, you've got a large brownish pigment spot right up in the lung area here, another left eye. You all see that?
That's, again, cancer of the lung. It's not black, that's brown. And oftentimes, just like the breast I showed you up here, that was not black, that was brown. And so oftentimes you just have a brown bush or a large brown discoloration that's moving out in the iris of the eye, which is a very definite, definable cancer condition. So don't be too sure that a brown spot's going to be safe.
Next slide. Okay, we got a right eye, and we've got a spot right up in this area, which will be another problem in the lung there. You all see that spot right there?
Now that happens to be an abscess in the lower lobe of that particular lung.
Okay, next slide. Okay, we got a couple of real dark brown to black spots right up there in the left lung. You'll notice you've also got quite an anemia ring. And do you remember what this brown ring is out here? That's your hamburger, which is what? Gastrointestinal or digestive problems. And I'd also call your attention to this out here in the sclera. See this kind of brownish, blackish kind of discoloration out there.
What are the symptoms? Okay, eyes. Let's look at this, everybody. See, Doug, show those blue spots in the sclera. You see them? Okay, let's have the lights on for just a moment. Okay, first symptom of these large and small blue spots in the sclera. First symptom for the blue spots up in the sclera, tiredness, extreme tiredness, bone-chilling tiredness. What's the second system, or the second symptom? Bruising easily, where you have what they call a purpura, or a purple type of bruise, or just bruising. What's the third symptom? Bleeding gums. And the gums will bleed, and you'll wonder, what's wrong with my mucous membrane? Because all you do is just barely touch the mucous membranes and the gums bleed. And what's the fourth one? Bleeding from the rectum or from the anus. And when that happens, then you're in pretty bad shape. Now, in this case, what are the symptoms of extreme tiredness, bruising, gum bleeding, and rectal bleeding? That is what they call leukemia. Now, the blue blotches in the sclera of the eye, if you have 3 in each eye, 3 or more in each eye, you will have anywhere from a low-level leukemia up to full-blown leukemia. Now, this is very, very important because it's prevalent these days. Now, you've got that book on Marishita, on a cure for cancer. What did he say about leukemia? Some of you must have read that. Where's the problem? In the small intestines. Now, what happens if you take care of the small intestines? The body manufactures red blood cells again, and then what happens to the leukemia? It disappears. Now, it's that simple. And so, therefore, you can take a look at your leukemia. Now, we have dealt with thousands and thousands of cases of diagnosed leukemia over the years. And they all come right. And the blue spots in the sclera go away. And the person's energy pattern is up. And they don't bruise anymore, and their gums don't bleed anymore, and they have good staying power. Now, the problem you're going to have if somebody comes to you with leukemia, you have to educate them and educate them to change their entire living program. Are you aware that sometimes they will live in a house over perhaps 2 water patterns which cross each other under the house and put a huge vortex right up through the bedroom where they're sleeping? And as a result of that, by laying in that vortex, they get this leukemia condition. Are you aware of that? Are you aware that some people live near high-powered lines around their house, and by living around high-powered lines, they have leukemia? Are you aware that some people live near the ends of runways on the airports, where they have their radar and so on, and what you call your not microwave, but your ELF, extremely low frequency waves that disrupts the body, and they end up with a high percentage of leukemia, where they're interacting with those the ELF frequencies? Hey, there's so much of this electronic smog going around, and people get they get their leukemias. It upsets the entire body. People get tired, they expire. Little children don't know what to do, they expire. Okay, Pam.
Is there anything that can be done in a house where you live that have the rivers crossing underneath the house?
Is there anything that can be done when you're in a house with rivers crossing under the house? Sometimes you can change the energy pattern with little metal coils. Most of the time you can't. And it's a good time to move and start looking for a new home. Doug.
Well, there's all sorts of energy influences in any area, and chances are in any dwelling that anybody lives in, there's going to be some spots that aren't so great. So one of the things that's very, very good to do in a house is you just kind of get a good dowser or somebody to check it out, because the areas that you spend the most time, like your bed and your favorite chair and that sort of thing, those are, you definitely want those to be in advantageous spots. You probably can't have an entire house that doesn't have any bad spots in it, but you at least don't want to sleep on a bad spot.
Roughly, if you look at grid lines, there's about every 6 feet there are grid lines. About every 6 feet. And it's nice to find out in your house where the grid lines are so that you can comfortably situate yourself where you're not on a location where the grid lines are crossing.
Like if you sleep to where a grid line is more or less kind of cutting you in half, for example, that's not such a great thing. So there's just little things you can do just in terms of where you put your bed and that kind of thing.
Or sleep higher in the bed. Okay. I mean, these are important things, and we can continue talking about these all night long. John, did you have something you want to say, sir? Sir John here? John? Is John Sears? Are you sure? Okay. Now, Doug, continue on, sir.
Okay, if we could get the next slide and the other things. Thank you. Okay, if we could go, let's see. Well, basically, you've got a lot of dark stuff up in here in the lung area and out in this way. Also, check out the lymphatic rosary, and you'll notice right in this area that it dips way in, and you've actually got some pretty intense mucoprotein right in here in zone 3 as well. So that whole lung area is going to be suspect.
I've had people who have lived under a railway trestle where the old smoke from the old smoke engines, big clouds of black smoke that they'd inhale in. And one time this one nurse, she ended up in a wheelchair and she couldn't get any air in her lungs. She got her on the program. And I recall later on, when I was in Maui, Hawaii, she gave me a phone call. And she also sent me a little package for Christmas with 12 long, black, shiny cylinders that she coughed up out of her lung where she was on a coughing spree for 12 months. And she coughed these things up out of her lungs almost within 2 or 3 days' time. And these were big black plugs in her bronchial area. And these little black holes up there in the lung area, Doug, could you show where those are, please? Okay, those all then filled in. Now, she called me in Maui, Hawaii, where she was, and for the first time for many years, she was out swimming in the surf. And she could breathe fully. But do you know what those little black things were when you carved them apart? Old black smoke from those great big engines from the coal. And so, Linda, now I don't know what you're doing, but would you come up here for 1 minute, please? Now, Linda's doing a good coughing job, and she's been coughing now for some time, but now we're down to pay dirt, and she's coughing up. I won't say she's coughing up the family jewels. But would you describe what you are coughing up, please? Thank you.
Well, they're just very small, hard, red stones. I don't know what they are, but they're just like very big pieces of sand. But they're red and hard. I haven't been able to crush them. I keep losing them because they're pretty small. But
would anybody know what little red stones that she can't mash with her fingers, they're solid like a crystal, coming up out of her lungs? Would anybody know what that might be?
That would be nice.
Well, we suggest she save them and make a setting out of it, But I mean, I've never heard of this before. But these are actually coming out of the lungs. Now, for myself, I've had little pieces of coral as the tuberculosis calcifications came out of my lungs, which I shared with you. But I've never heard of these little red crystals coming out. Little red beads, very small.
Last week I had a really high fever for a couple of days. I was in and out of bed from Tuesday night on, and that went on for quite some time. And my father has emphysema and has had it for many years, and he actually got that from poisons from sprays and things when he was quite young. So I don't know.
We're into it, but we don't know what we're into. Thank you, Linda. Doug.
Okay, next slide. Okay, another problem in the lung area, possibly into the bronchioles. You'll notice in the chart where you've got the bronchioles in zone 3 at about this area. So that's kind of borderline lung or bronchioles.
Now, this person is diagnosed with walking pneumonia. And the doctors don't know what to do with him because he keeps getting all this fluid coming up in his bronchioles and lungs. Look at that. Now, what's he got there, Doug? Look at that real closely and tell me what it looks like. But the medical doctor's diagnosis is walking pneumonia.
Well, I mean, there's a pretty good chance he's got some cancer there. I mean, it's
That's what it looks like to me. What happens when people have continual fluid buildup in their lung? Oftentimes, that's a good sign that there's a metabolic breakdown there and possibly a cancerous condition. Well, we put him on the program, and then everything cleared up, and that thing just withered up and disappeared. Pigmentation changed and just started breaking up in little pieces and virtually went away. Any questions? Okay, continue on, sir. Pardon me? There appears to be.
You might be dealing with the bronchus right in that area.
I'll say it down a little bit there, Doug.
Right in here?
Down right about in that area, up a little bit, right there. And that would be about a 180-degree reflex from that blip in the bronchial. And you might have a 90-degree reflex there, too. And you might have a 150-degree reflex there also, right, going to that point, which is a very powerful reflex. And you have probably a 60-degree reflex. Okay, they're all there, and they're all tied in together. And so they could all be tied into one particular problem that we're dealing with, and that's that walking pneumonia. Okay? Next slide.
Okay, I believe we have a left eye here, and you have a pretty big lesion up in this area, which could well be the lung, and then you've got this pigment spot right out in that area. You can see where the shadow is way up there.
Use this, Doug, so they can see it. I don't think...
You look right here, and you've got a pretty large lesion, closed lesion right in this area, which may be an inherited weakness in the lung. And you've got this pigmentation spot out in that area, which may indicate the lung area as well, where we've got ourselves a left eye here.
Now, would you say that person's not lung for this world? I'm sorry.
Next.
Where's the yellow sheets, Doug?
Well, we should still be on the lung unless the thing we're going into next after the lung is going to be the breast. I mean, it looks like there's some lesions and things out in that area and maybe some swollen fibers in through there.
Is that the lung?
I'm not seeing anything.
I see a lot in the breast.
Right down in through here.
Look at the indentations and so on.
Yeah, right in through there. This may be pertaining to the breast, where you've got heavy indentation into the autonomic nerve wreath.
And the pigmentation there too.
Pigmentation right out in that area.
That's right.
Okay, next.
Now this is one of Dr. Jensen's slides. I want to show you one important thing. Right down at 6 o'clock, do you see that black closed lesion there? This gentleman who has this particular eye has a very bad case of varicose veins. Are you there? This is a right eye, and this is a right leg. But right there at 6 o'clock, you've got a great big closed lesion. Now, this is the one I looked at for a long, long time because I thought to myself, okay, from a functional point of view, what would give a person these heavy, heavy varicose veins, very ugly things, and what would give a person that? Pardon me? You don't have a prolapsus of the transverse colon right here. Now, what gives a person this problem? What did I talk to you about when we have a closed lesion in a given area? It's a genetic problem, but what kind of a genetic problem? Lack of
nerve supply.
Lack of nerve supply. Write that down and never forget that. So wherever you see a closed lesion in the iris of the eye, which can be several of them up there that you can work on there, just on that one eye, you put down that on the body electronics flow sheet, because that'll tell you where you've got your problem. Now, once you get the closed lesion squared away, okay, by getting the nerve supply and circulation back in there, what happens to the closed lesion in the iris of the eye? Okay, watch. Once you work on that area, lower back, and get the nerve supply down the legs from the lower back and work on all these points, then the fibers start moving up from the pigment layer and fill this in from the inside out here, okay? You follow me? Now, as the fibers move anteriorly forward, you've got the fibers come up here, and this, instead of being kind of a weak constitution thing, you have many, many hundreds of fibers moving anteriorly, and then as they continue to move, this part here at the very tip gets thinner and thinner until finally it opens up and becomes more like an open lesion rather than a closed lesion. Now, this would be an open lesion right here because it's not closed. See, this starts here, goes around, comes back here. This is an open lesion. This right here, see this right here? That's an open lesion because it's not closed. This is a closed lesion. From Jensen's point of view, this means it heals slowly. The reason it heals slowly is because it has a shutdown of the nerve supply to that area. So this opens up gradually, okay? And first of all, when this thing opens up, it'll look somewhat like this one right here. Do you see this? And then gradually it'll look like this one right here, where this broadens out and this part here moves out toward a little bit toward the edge of the iris, and this becomes quite broad and quite open, and then finally it disappears entirely. Do you hear me? Closed lesions, according to the German school, do not disappear. Closed lesions, according to Dr. Jensen's work, do not disappear. In this work with body electronics, when the nerve supply is restored to these areas, as indicated here, and you make very careful positionings on the chart, then you know that as that particular area heals and regenerates, then the closed lesion is going to open up and disappear. Now, are there any questions on that? Yes. Come up here, please. We want this on tape so we know what the answer is going to be.
So one of the first tests to do will be to pinch the leg to see if there is any sensation.
You don't even have to do that because you know they don't have sensation.
Okay.
But you can pinch the leg and use a little pinch test. You know that they're not going to have good feeling down there. But you know you're going to have to work on all of the areas where you check on all the different nerve supplies that take things down to the legs and work those things out. And sometimes you will be working on a point where holographically this will go through a marvelous healing crisis without even dealing with nerve supply that go to the legs. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Okay. And then the fibers just keep moving up through that until eventually they break through here and you have an open lesion, then eventually that disappears.
Thank you.
Got it? Any questions? Hey, I don't even hear anybody asking me a question. And when I'm not getting questions, I get real concerned. Can I have the lights on? I want to see your eyeballs from the front of the room here. Now, you've been through a lot of iridology over the last few months and so on. Do you know the importance of what I've just told you? That you're not set in concrete, that you're a very flexible, mobile, moving, intelligent being, where as you change your consciousness, your whole body changes, which is then reflected in the iris of the eye as things are moving around in there? Do any of you challenge me on that? I don't know what in the world's wrong because nobody challenges me on this anymore. Have you seen enough color change and fiber change and whatnot to realize that there might be something true to that? Okay, that's the way it is. I used to be intimidated all the time by everybody, and I have my defenses up, and I get my weight heavy and strong there, and I get my defenses up and get my aggressive air going here, and I don't find that anymore. I don't find any resistance to this concept. Other people used to say, no way is that fibers ever going to change. But they do. Doug.
I was just wondering about another possibility for causing varicose veins.
Speak up, dear.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering about another possibility for causing varicose veins.
To what?
Another possibility of a causation for varicose veins being really severe lymphatic congestion to the point of lumps in the nodes here in the groin, which could cause back pressure and slow down the venous return and cause it to blow out that way.
Who has them?
I used to.
Okay. Did you use a lot of stir fry? Did you have a lot of fried food and stir fry and that sort of thing? Using a lot of cooked oils?
A long time ago.
Good. Doug, would you talk about that for a while?
Well, basically, a lot of when you take your oils, which have a lot of your unsaturated fatty acids in them, and you heat them over about 160 degrees centigrade or about 320 degrees Fahrenheit, you form a lot of what are called your trans fatty acids. The normal formation of an unsaturated fatty acid is what's called a cis fatty acid, CIS, and that's the natural form that would be useful in the human body.
Explain the difference, if you would, between a cis and a trans isomer.
Well, basically, you have one or more places along the fatty acid chain where it's unsaturated, where there's room for hydrogen, and basically, depending on how the hydrogen atoms on either side of that double bond line up, you're going to get because of the electrical repulsion, you're either going to get a straight. Basically, when the hydrogens are across from each other, the things are going to be straight at that. So trans would mean across from each other. So the fatty acid is going to be quite straight at the double bond in a trans fatty acid, whereas with the cis fatty acid, they're going to be on the same side as each other, so they're going to repel each other, and it's going to put a kink in it. And so instead of being straight, it's going to have a bend in it. This is why when you take something like say take corn oil, which would mainly be under normal circumstances, it would be mainly unsaturated, and it would be in the cis fatty acid form. The hydrogenation process let's skip that. Let's just put it this way: the trans fatty acid, it's close enough to the cis fatty acid that within the body it can take up the space of the cis fatty acid. It's virtually the same in molecular structure, except for the fact that the hydrogen has moved around a little bit, and so things have straightened out. But other than that, it's the same length and all the rest. And the major problem with the trans fatty acid is that it takes up the space of a cis fatty acid, but it doesn't do the work. It's kind of like having a key that fits into a lock, but won't open the door. And once it's in the lock, it tends to get stuck in the lock. So it's not a real good thing if you're trying to get out of the room. When people have done a lot of the stir fries, you're going to get a lot of problems with the trans fatty acid buildup, because obviously they've been heated above 160 centigrade or 320 Fahrenheit. A lot of this stuff within the body is going to behave in such a way that it tends to settle out in the arteries and the veins and clog things up quite a bit. and so you're going to have a lot of blockages there in the veins as a result of the trans fatty acids from all the fried foods. And so that would be another factor here, I would think.
Okay? And so you have the body then clogged up with what we call body junk. Okay? And therefore, that remains there until it is removed from a heavy nutritional program, which emulsifies the fatty material that is clogging the walls of the arteries, that come back to the work that has been done, extensive work has been done on that. I'm trying to remember the name of the author on the...
Erasmus?
Not Erasmus.
Finnegan?
No, we're talking now about the scar tissue put forth by the xanthine oxidase factor.
Oster.
Kurt Oster. Now this work here is powerful because it shows that the scar tissue inside of both the arteries and the veins is caused by milk, where the xanthine oxidase, for example, in cow's milk, that primarily, when it's homogenized, will actually scar up the walls of the arteries and the veins, and then that then allows the gradual accumulation of the fatty substances in the plaque buildup, which builds up these obstructions in the artery walls, which gives you these immobilization of the walls of the arteries and veins, and you have all kinds of varicose veins resulting from that. You with me on this? And so what we have to have then is, if you take your flax oil, which I'm sure Doug has already explained to you, with your lecithin, this helps to liquefy this material inside of your arteries and your veins. Your arteries first and then your veins. And then this emulsification of that material is then digested by the additional lipase you're taking. And then gradually the arteries come back to full normal function. And you will not have varicose veins. All right? Simon.
Careful, guys.
How's that, Tom?
Golden boy.
What is it in cow's milk? Did you say it was cow's milk? That
it was xanthine oxidase, which they call the XO factor.
Right.
It's an enzyme found primarily in cow's milk.
But not in mother's milk?
Not in mother's milk, not in goat's milk, but in cow's milk. That especially when you homogenize it, you break it up in such small particles that it penetrates directly the walls of the small intestine, goes directly into the arteries of the body, and irritates the walls of the arteries, so that the end result is scar tissue where the irritation occurs.
Right, and that's a natural thing in cow's milk. Doesn't come from the homogenizing or pasteurizing process.
That the homogenizing process increases the availability, shall we say, of the xanthine oxidase to pass through the walls of the small intestine and cause all this problem.
It's in the cow's milk to begin with, but it's ordinarily part of a large enough fatty type molecule. The molecule is big enough that it doesn't tend to pass through the walls of the small intestine, and it just gets excreted in most cases.
But it will. You'll absorb part of that.
But as it's pasteurized, that molecule's...
It's not the pasteurization, it's the homogenization. The homogenization will break the molecular structure down to where then you have far more of the xanthine oxidase absorbed, and through a chain reaction, it actually does start to eat up the artery walls, or kind of eats up the... there's a substance called plasmalogen, but it's basically like the mortar between the bricks. It's what's holding the walls together, and this will start to break it down, and the scar tissue that forms there is really your body's attempt to keep the arteries from just falling apart. So that's basically what's going on. And there's a book on this subject called The XO Factor that's very good, and it's by Kurt Oster, O-S-T-E-R.
This man hopefully will get the Nobel Prize for his contribution. But the thing is, it's very hard on the milk industry, the dairy industry, because he has proven conclusively that this is the prime cause for arterial disease patterns in the body. So milk, stay away from cow's milk and the various materials made from cow's milk, especially if it's homogenized. Yes, sir? Now, I'm afraid to ask, are there any questions? But are there any questions? Now, we're getting into some stuff here that now's the time to ask these questions and clear out the air and look at some of the deep implications of what we're dealing with, because we're talking about a lot of no-nos like leukemia and things like this, and I want to make sure that you fully understand exactly what you're dealing with. I will say this kindly. On people who've had leukemia, where I evidently didn't make it very clear that if you start out with 3 spots, blue spots, in each sclera, then chances are pretty good that you have a low-level leukemia. I learned this from Dr. Stu Wheelwright, whom I never met, but our paths crisscrossed 1,000 times. And Stu told people that if they had 3 or more blue spots in each sclera, that they would have leukemia. I checked this out and found out that people did have, if they had 3 spots, low-level leukemia. I have a long story I can tell. Don't think I'll go into here. But the thing is if you have 8 or 9 spots through there, through each iris, or each sclera, I mean, then you're going to be very, very tired, and your bruising, which you're already doing, then it'll take about 6 weeks for the bruising to stop, roughly. The tiredness will still be there, but you won't be as bone-chilling tired. Your energy will pick up, and you'll start feeling better. But it'll take a while before all of those little blue spots are gone. It's taken me, the way I do things, which isn't always the best way of doing it, it's taken me several years before I have, how many, 1 in each eye? About 1, and 8 years ago I had just a whole bunch in both eyes, and frankly I was quite tired, my gums bleed, and I bruised a bit and had some problems, but those are gone now. So I want you just to consider that the body will heal. Any questions, Tom? Looks like you're ready on a race.
Really? I want to see if I could beat Tenna and Brooke up here to be the first one with the microphone. The program, first off, on leukemia, usually a lot of kids get that first, and kids will heal on this thing because of their consciousness change. Kids can usually change that. How about somebody older, and specifically I'm thinking of my mom, who is not sick, but she's like, that's where I got my genes from, my mom and my dad, that just really keep me, going through breaking things up and everything, and she and my dad are just the same way. They can just keep right on going. I want to see her keep doing that. How effective will this program be without a consciousness change?
Let's look at it carefully here. How effective will this be without a consciousness change? After you go through a healing crisis, then all of a sudden, all you have to do is accept. Somebody else might morphogenetically have already gone through the pain for those folks. Okay? And the thing is all they have to do is change their mind. You find an awful lot of people out there where they're just changing tremendously, and perhaps somebody else paid the price. No, they want to, because most people do want to know, most people are pretty doggone good people, but they've got their glitches like we all have. But when they're presented with the truth of a matter, chances are pretty good they accept it, and they understand it. This is what we have to look forward to, and I believe it's going to happen. Okay? Any questions there? Okay.
This is going back to the leukemia, John. Was that, we saw one picture of the sclera. We'll see more. Oh, that's fine. Okay, thanks.
You'll see more. Okay, any questions? Okay, lights off, please. And we'll get on to business here with the, close the doors, please. Okay, we've discussed this one here. If we could have the next one, Matthew, please. Okay. Which eye? Right eye. What do we have right here? Okay, this is the cecum area in the right eye. You follow that? So colonic therapy. And this is what area? Adrenal. Will this heal unless we take care of that? Chances are no. Here you have a little bush in the kidney area. A few little holes. See these little black holes here? That's in the kidney area. Chances are we've got a problem. Now, I want to just see if you remember this. If I have between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock a lot of radii solaris like this, what does that usually indicate? The neck, first and second cervical, need adjusting. Sometimes some people say all you have to do is the first cervical, but I think the entire neck should be put in. Next slide. I don't know. All right, look at this one, please. Right here. You'll see that little Christmas tree? Where's that located? In the breast area? This is breast cancer. Just take a look at it, and that's what it looks like. I've tried to isolate some of these for you so that I can separate them so that it's clear. Oh. When somebody starts reaching for my books, I get quite possessive. Okay, right over here now, what would this be right in this area? It's not the cecum. This happens to be which eye? Happens to be the left eye, which as you're looking at it is on the right, so this is the what? The sigmoid colon. Now, if you look carefully, you'll see a lot of pigmentation, or actually white catarrh right down through here with black holes. Now, is that the leg, or is that the kidneys? Where is it? And that's the question you're going to have to find out. Where is the person? What's the person looking at? You don't know because of the overlapping of organ area. I think that's clear, isn't it? Okay, next. What do we have right here? Breast cancer. That's all you see, and that's what you get. Okay, next. Okay, take a good close look at this one. What do you have? Pardon me? Which eye? Right eye? What do you have right here? There you have your breast cancer. That's what it looks like. That's right in the rib area, but you also have the breast cancer in that area. Next slide. Okay. Now take a look in here very carefully. It's just here's where you have a full program. See this area right through here? Automatically, thyroid, parathyroid will have to be worked with. Now, if the thyroid and the parathyroid have to be worked with, then how about all of the other organs below that in the endocrine system? How about all of the other organs in the endocrine system above that? Here's where you're going to have to take a good close look, because whenever we have a thyroid, you have to go back and take a look at the pituitary. If you've got a pituitary, you have to work on the medulla, which is the nerve plexus that controls the pituitary. You're having to go back to the hypothalamus, which has the hormone-releasing hormones that control the pituitary, and therefore you go all the way back to the pineal again. Any question on that? Okay. If you've got a thyroid problem, you know that you're going to have a pituitary problem. You're going to have a medulla problem because the medulla is the nerve plexus that controls the pituitary. You're going to have a hypothalamus problem because that's the area that controls the releasing hormones that controls the pituitary. And that goes right back to the pineal gland again. So you go on your body electronics flow sheet. You take a look up in here, and you can probably consider very, very carefully that you're going to have a pineal problem, you're going to have a pituitary problem, you're going to have a thyroid problem, you're going to have a medulla problem over here, and you go right on down, and then where are your problems? They're all going to be involved. Now, I've got a problem. I want to talk it over with you, very frankly. May I have the lights on, please? And Matthew, if you turn off this. Later. I want to talk about a very delicate subject. Years ago, I did a tremendous amount of research on what they call radionics. And I was trained in radionics, and I got results with radionics, and I believe to this day in radionics. And I started doing a lot of work with the pendulum. I started dowsing this and dowsing that, and I had a lot of, because all of a sudden, where I used to scoff at pendulums and scoff at dowsing equipment and so on, and because it didn't work for me, all of a sudden one day I took this willow branch and went out with a very dear friend of mine. He showed me how to use it, and I looked at it and said, "Oh, this is a bunch of garbage, but I'll go along with your silly game." And I went out, and I walked over a water line, and the willow branch just bent right out of my hands. I said, "Oh." And I walked backward again, and the thing bent down out of my hands again. And I said, "Oh." You know, that's how I felt inside. And all of a sudden, I felt like I had a lot of mud and egg and everything else all over my face. And I had to do a little bit of backtracking. Because suddenly, I could dowse. For many years, I couldn't dowse. Now, that got my attention. So I started dealing then with all kinds of different dowsing techniques using a pendulum. And I believed that what I was doing was correct. I remember going down and getting trained in hyperbaric chamber work and working with different forms of natural healing under Dr. Edward Carl down in Chula Vista, Mexico, at what they call the Port of Health. And I was there for quite some time. And there were other people there that were all expert pendulum people that I respected. And so Dr. Carl said one time, he said, "Now look, if I were to cut up a banana into 12 equal pieces, and if I were to lace 4 pieces of that banana with this deadly cyanide, would you be able to detect it?" And these 3 gentlemen all said yes, they'd have no trouble at all detecting the poisonous content in the banana. And so Dr. Carl, with his lab assistant, went ahead and organized the banana, and just at random took 4 pieces and laced it and marked it so that everyone in the laboratory knew which ones were the deadly cyanide. And then each of these pendulum experts went ahead and did their thing with the laced banana pieces, and not one of them got any of the 4 cyanide laced bananas. And this was a great disappointment to me, because I said, hey, I have been respecting this gentleman, one gentleman in particular, for years, and all of a sudden he said he could, and now he can't find the poisonous pieces of banana. And so I started having, at that time, a little doubt about dowsing. Then up in Chicago, we had a big seminar in northern Chicago, and at that time, we put out several tables, and I think we had about 10 volunteers that would be volunteered for 2 things, for diagnosis and for prescription using the pendulum. And I don't remember now how many people we had, but we had several people who are all well-known pendulum experts. And they all went individually from table to table and wrote down their prescriptions and wrote down their diagnosis. And what was absolutely astounding to me is that when I looked at the eyes of these people, every single diagnosis from my point of view, looking at the iris of the eye, was totally wrong. And none of them were anywhere near each other. They were all contradicting one another in the diagnosis and the prescriptions. And so I set my foot very firmly at that point of time to not set my foot firmly in favor of dowsing from that time. I questioned it. You know what I mean? I decided that I wasn't going to drive my stakes too deep regarding dowsing. And I haven't been dowsing like that with confidence since that time, because I realized from my experimentation after that the dowsing would only represent my own state of mind. Are you hearing me? And this is where it had to come. Now, I would give the benefit of the doubt by saying that the dowsing is no clearer than the person doing the dowsing. But I have found that there's nobody who's clear. Therefore, at best, there's going to be errors in any type of dowsing, no matter who does it. Now, then I go back to water dowsing. And I take a willow branch and it turns right out of my hand. And I could go back and start dowsing different types of water lines under the soil and so on, or small streams under the soil, and I take a look at that and say, well, is that different or isn't it different? But it appears to me to be different. But I'm wondering then, okay, then what is dowsing? And I have more questions than I have answers. Is that all right? But what I have found is that even with the very finest intentions, and even with the great sincerity of each soul that I know, they will all contradict each other on dowsing when it comes to their prescriptions and their diagnosis of a number of people. And that kind of shook me a little bit in my confidence in dowsing. Yet, there's a time, place, and purpose for all things under heaven. Now, when dowsing is used, which some people do, and they have all these preconceived ideas in their head, and they start dowsing and they say, okay, I'll douse this point, and then they say, okay, we don't have to do the pineal, we don't have to do the pituitary, we don't have to do the thyroid, we don't have to do this, we don't have to do that, but we need to work on the heel down here on this point. And all you have to do is hold that heel, according to my dowsing technique, for only 5 minutes and no more. Or we go over here and we douse on this point on the chest, and we only have to hold that for 10 minutes and no more. And they've already got a full program worked up where whether the person is flat or not on the point, then they have dowsed from their positioning exactly how long you have to hold a point on different points, with no concern for the point going flat. And at that point, I get my dander up, because I spent 45 years developing this technique. And when I look at that, I find it's very difficult to have some person who is still wet behind their ears, as far as I'm concerned, in body electronics, making judgments as to which points are going to be held when they don't know the first thing about the sequential steps for opening up the endocrine system, so the person can have all their hormones working and everything working, so that they can have all of the hormones present in the body as a catalytic agent for the endothermic, exothermic reactions, which are part and parcel of the healing crisis that the body goes through. And so if you see me casting a little wry grin at you for deciding how the point holding should be used, I think it'll be well received on your part, because I want you to know, don't do that. Just don't do that. Don't do any dowsing and try to interfere with the sequential program that I have been working with and trying to develop over many, many years. You'll be making a very bad mistake. If you want to use the iris of the eye, which is the window to the soul, this is the best form of diagnostic technique that I have ever come upon, and it's far more powerful when it's done properly than for a diagnostic tool than any dowsing technique I've ever seen. So I just want to share that with you. I'm not going to slap anybody's hands, because we're all sincere. We're all doing the best we can with the knowledge that we have. But I would urge you to question very sincerely the dowsing that you're doing. And I know you're doing it out there, because I've done it for years, and I've changed my mind about it considerably because of the mistakes that have been made. Clear enough? Okay on that? Okay. Now this might upset some of you. Don't worry about that. We'll probably get upset much more a little later on. All right? Any questions? Pardon me? Come on up here, Esther.
If one has been following the courses or so, why would one want to use the pendulum to find points?
Because they use the pendulum to find out which herbs the person should use, when during the day they should take it, how many they should take it, how many weeks they should take it, when to go down to get the letter at the post office, when the sun's going to shine, or when the chicken should lay an egg. And you'd be surprised on how thorough the pendulum rules the people. They can't make a decision without getting a swing of their pendulum. And I'm a little concerned about that, because it gets them into hot water. They can't talk to you unless the pendulum says, yes, you can talk to this person. And they won't answer the phone. The phone rings, the pendulum comes out. Well, I can't answer the phone because the pendulum says no. Is there any difference between that and the Ouija board? Try to consider that. Pardon me? Yes. This is something I just want you to consider. Yet there are forces, like if you take and look at the calyx, or the swirls of hair up the spine, and you put the pendulum over it, the energies in the body will force that pendulum to swing a certain way in harmony with the curves of the hair along the spine, going up the spine. Now look at that. I said, okay, there's forces here that to some degree validate the pendulum. And I think as long as we can use the pendulum within the parameters for which that pendulum is designed to operate, we'll be all right. But when we get out and start predicting the future and things like this, then I think we're going to be totally off base. And when people tell me, which they told me today, that this This class will be ending at noon today, and everyone will be going home, and that's the end of body electronics, and that's the end of me. And so I told them when noon came, I'm still here. I told them you might be talking to God, but God evidently lied to you, and therefore this is the only other alternative is you're listening to some little spirit telling you what to do. Okay, and they still think they're right because they are now having phenomenal experiences with something telling them something which is false. You have to be careful about believing a lie, because as you're opening up your chakra systems, you in turn open up your auric fields, and you can not only have beautiful, wonderful spiritual experiences, but you'll also have visitations from the wrong type of entities. And what I have found is that the counterfeit usually appears before the truth, just to test the tar out of you. And so just please remember what I'm saying here and be very, very careful, because some people are taken in and they're very happy to have a spiritual experience, and they won't let go of it because they think it's a spiritual experience when they're actually being deceived by some entity. You got to be careful, folks. We're walking now on very dangerous ground, and every step that we take forward, you're going to have somebody there to try to knock us back a few steps. Okay, sir.
Okay, here's a couple of things that I know will give false readings on pendulums and using that sort of technique. Number one, if the person's on any sort of glory trip and trying to prove that they, like when these bananas were laid out, oh yeah, I can do that. But in that when they get in that proving vibration, an entity will come in with that sort of same vibration. I can prove things, and of course it's going to be confused information that comes through. And another thing is when people say, should I do this, should I do that, should I leave my wife, should I buy this car, all this sort of stuff, that's... I'll get my tarot cards and find out. Yeah, it's like there's no way that those answers can come from any sort of higher intelligence, because that sort of energy loves us so much that they won't tell us what to do, they'll let us find out for ourselves, So if somebody's trying to just running their life by asking questions, should I do this, then, it's just a matter of time, and confused information is going to come through from entities.
That was right on, my friends, from my point of view. Okay, that's right on, and I think that should be considered. Yes, sir.
When I first got interested in the pendulum, it occurred to me to take the list of horse races for Saturday afternoon at Flemington. So I asked the pendulum which horse would be the biggest money winner out of the 6 races, and wrote down the name of the horse that the pendulum gave me. Went through all 6 races, you see all the horses in 6 races, and got the one that would be the biggest winner. And to my absolute amazement, I watched television that night, that horse was the one that won the most money. So I did that 4 weeks running, and every week I got it exactly right. And by this time I was starry-eyed, so the next week I did the same thing with the pendulum, and then I put a bet on that horse. Well, of course, the horse didn't even show.
When we're on a heavy mineral therapy program then, and we're going through cleansing and into healing crisis, does this mean then that we can have entities take over something that we are doing, like you say, in the name of God, in the name of light, and things like that, that we would let that... Does anybody know what I'm trying to say? Well, I like the program. I think the program's great, taking the supplements and the minerals like that, but I'd sure hate to be doing something to cleanse and all of a sudden,
Okay. Have you ever been knocked unconscious, sir? Never been unconscious? Okay. How about when you've had accidents? Do you ever get clobbered pretty heavily where you're under sedation and... Okay? Okay? Now, pardon me? Never did drugs. Okay. Now, coffee, tea, tobacco? Okay, chances are, now I'm just going to level with you, this is my findings, maybe you haven't had a problem, but maybe your mother did or your father did, where they had problems, and then you inherited those, or could have inherited those, because the weaknesses of our parents are passed on down to the kids. And if they have a hole in their body, in their aura, we inherit that weakness. And it can be quite a problem. And so we're on the program, and let's say we're on a heavy program. And all of a sudden, you'll have something roaring out of you that you wonder where it came from. And better out than in, and after it's over and done with, you're very happy about the thing. But we've had people on the program for 20 years, and all of a sudden they're tussling with an entity, which is a very real entity that's been there for a long, long time in the hole in their aura, and they haven't dealt with it until that time.
But we wouldn't take one in because of the program.
Um, okay, Anita?
What he's asking is, would we take an entity in from the program? Okay, from the body electronics program. And what I would, first of all, I want to say about alcohol. Alcohol definitely brings entities in. Definitely creates holes in the aura. Okay, and to the other question, I would say there's been times when I've been around a point holding group and I've come home and I do feel an entity around me and I can't sleep and I do have to give the command.
Now, I have seen situations where people who are, let's say they're taking quite a heavy doses of different materials, and they are actually forcing nutritionally for the hole in the auric field to close, especially when they're going through high fevers and healing crisis situations. At that time, if there are entities for any cause in that individual and they come out, they're going to fight for survival because they're losing control of their habitation, their body. And they'll fight and do everything they can to keep it. And they're extremely skillful in doing what is necessary to keep that body. And they can come roaring out of a person. Or you can hear voices, you can see faces, you can see one thing or another, and you're absolutely sure that what you're doing is you're talking to God at that point of time, or talking to an angel, because they said so. Sometimes you just get all kinds of feelings, that strong feelings and emotions that you wonder where they come from. If you buy into it, they're sitting back laughing all the time about the situation that they're involved in. You follow me? Now you have to be careful about the program, because when these entities come out, a person doesn't realize that they've had that thing for 20 years. Donna.
Back to you. Most of the people, I think, in the age groups that we have in here, their mothers were probably drugged, unless you're from a country that doesn't do that when you were being born. So I think we probably would be affected by that. I know my mom was. One of the questions I had was, the tarot cards, do they invite in entities too?
Nita?
I would definitely say yes, because you are, most of it is channeled material. I mean, the cards are just there, but actually you're channeling the energy in to get the message.
Okay, then would dowsing and the pendulum be the same thing?
Are you divining? Well, using a pendulum, predicting the future, using tarot cards? Are we looking at the outer manifestation, or are we looking at the inner essence?
Basically, if I've used either one, it was just for a communication from me to me. You know, the pendulum I can't use because the pendulum will do whatever I want it to. So I just don't plain trust that. I don't use it.
Now let's look at the tarot cards. If you're using the tarot cards and you put your energy into them and they're spread out there, is that an outer manifestation of your energy field at that time? Just like tea leaves. Yes, very definitely. Isn't that true? And so can some people look at a person's auric field and read their aura? Is that any different than a tarot card reading or a tea leaf reading? Because you're looking at the outer manifestation, aren't you? Is it any different than looking at the palm of the hand and reading the lines in the palm of the hand and then telling a person what their future is based upon what they see in the hand? Come on.
So are they using outer entities to do those things, or is it just a communication of their higher self through them?
What I'm trying to point out is no entity situation is simply divining. Now the problem is when we take a look at these things and we do all our divining and look at the astrology charts, we work our astrology charts out real clearly and we can see the picture and pattern of our crystals. That's very real. But what happens when we say that this is set in concrete, or the lines in her hand, that is set in concrete, or the tarot cards, that is set in concrete, or the tea leaves, that is set in concrete? But that's what most people do, don't they? They look at their horoscope and they won't go out of the house unless the chart says it's safe to go out of the house that day. Now, here is how it is. When you're dealing from a position of faith, then the astrological chart has no validity for you at that time because you're dealing from a position of this is what you're going to do and this is how you're going to do it, and you're working with a whole different situation, and you're not letting your reactive mechanisms mold and direct your life. When you're working from a position of faith, regardless of what the tarot cards say, you're not letting this outer manifestation of your feelings and emotions guide and direct your life. You're working from a position of principle and law rather than from reaction and divining, as you'd call it. You with me? The same thing with the lines on the hands. Are you aware that when you change your consciousness, that all of the lines on the hands will change dramatically? Yours have changed, and this is the way it is. So there's a certain will and desire which can control and direct our outer manifestation without relying upon what is coming from our reactive mechanism, which some people can read very clearly through the charts, which other people can intuitively read, and so on, and they can become extremely accurate because they can read the pictures that are there. But when we change our inner consciousness and decide how we're going to direct our life, then these other things become totally meaningless because we're not dealing with reactive mechanisms. We're dealing with the exercise of faith and principle and law. Okay, does that help? Okay, well, who should be directing? We should be individually responsible rather than relying upon tarot cards or... Now, you can take a tarot card reading 1 minute, do it again, and have another tarot card reading, and do it again, and have another tarot card reading, and you wait till you get the one that you like. Now, this is the tarot card reader here. Anita, I want you to tell us how it is.
Well, I don't do that anymore, but... I think Well, you're asking that the God presence come through you to allow you to give the best reading possible. But I think with all these things, there comes a time where we don't know whether it's really the divine presence or whether the person may have an entity that's influencing us or whatever. If the person that we're doing the reading on, I think because we're in that state of we're trying to get the reading, I think an entity could possibly, if our aura is weakened, I think influence us.
Now here, if you want to have some fun, do this. You get a Strong's exhaustive concordance of the Bible and look up under divining. And you take a look at all of the definitions of divining and take a look and see what it says in the Old Testament, in Leviticus and Deuteronomy and so on, and bounce around in there. And then when you find out, and you read book 2, I think it is, I have some of that stuff in there, you study that very, very carefully, and you realize, where are we putting our attention? On the outer, which then leads us down the road of sorcery by focusing on the outer, or are we looking toward the inner, which will then allow us to gravitate toward the evolutionary path?
What I had gotten and when I prayed about that aspect before was that they each showed a small piece, and none of them are the complete truth, and that we are not supposed to put faith in them because, one, they're not complete, and for two, you've got, like you were saying, people that wouldn't get out of bed unless they did the pendulum and that, and so they're looking in the wrong direction. It's almost, it can be, not necessarily is with each individual, it could be a sort of an idolatry.
Thank you, Donna. Do you want to say something?
I would like to say that we are creating our life every minute, every moment. We are creating it. So the cards and everything will give you the picture of that moment, but that's it. That moment is gone then. The next moment you are there to create, and the next moment you're there to create. So, people ask questions in tarot readings like, should I leave my wife? Should I leave my husband? Should I leave my job? Should I take this business proposition? Yes, you can do it. If you want to create it, yes, you can do it.
What's the rest of it? Okay, I would say you can create it if you want to, but you're going to have to assume responsibility for your actions. And bottom line, I think the whole thing is individual responsibility for what we do or what we don't do. Neil?
Yes, back to what Tom was talking about. The situation of entities coming in because of the program, I see that as, what we were talking about yesterday, about going along the wave through the year. On occasions, I suppose you can go along and then all of a sudden you bottom right out. Well, I've had that experience in my life where I had a fantastic high at one time, and then I really bottomed out. For months I was in a situation where I'd look around me and virtually the air was dripping, it was just dripping with emotion, solid emotion. And I was sort of, pretty freaked out by it all, but gradually I came out of it. But, just seeing how our karma comes to us, I'm pretty sure it was Yogananda actually said that if we got all our karma in one go, our body would just fall apart. The laws of physics would just go, So as our God presence deals a bit of karma to us, I would imagine, there would be, as it deals us a bit more, as we decide to give ourselves that, then we buckle a bit, so wait a minute, But there would be a few entities coming in along with that, I would imagine, and we deserve every bit of it. But I imagine that's the way. Do you see it that way?
I'm sure that somewhere there was this great sage that made a statement one time that finally ended up on everybody's bumper stickers. My karma ran over your dogma. And I thought it had to be a great sage to think that way. I mean, he had to have some good thinking behind him. Linda, are you waiting to talk, or just holding the chair up?
Just on that same subject that Anita was responding to Tom about drinking and taking in entities. Last year when we were here, there was a gentleman here who on the point holding started to release a lot of entities. And when he was younger, he'd done a lot of drinking with his football crowds and things, and he used to write himself off for the weekend. And so during the point holding, he did release lots and lots of entities. And then after the point holders left, he lay on the floor and kept going for another hour or more, didn't he? It was really interesting for me.
You know the rest of the story? He went home and sat for about 6 months wondering where he was and where he was going and what he was doing, because he wasn't being run around by these little imps anymore. And he just sat there. Until finally he got up and decided to do something. But that was him deciding it. And he's been going out strong ever since, but he's doing it. But he went home and just sat. He just didn't know who he was because all his friends were gone. It's quite an experience. Okay, Vivian.
What about dowsing then, and finding a good place for one's bed? What could you say something about that, John? Is that accurate? Is that okay, or what?
I do it, and I think that everything has its time, place, and purpose. But the thing is, if you're predicting the future by it, when's the stock market going to crash, etc., ad nauseum. Everyone wants to know where to go and what to do and how fast. And the thing is this is where we get into danger areas that are can leave us very, very foolish with a lot of egg on our face.
I found one way to discern an entity from a higher soul is that entities can't give us goosebumps. Like it's a higher soul can move in when there's entities around, like to buffer us or to protect us. But like our own electromagnetic field, or aura, or life energy, or whatever you want to call it, it can be measured. It's almost enough to light up a Christmas tree bulb. It's almost 4 watts. And the energy of a higher soul is more refined than that. It's a faster vibration. And when they come close to us, they'll make our nerve endings stand on end. So you'll get the little hairs on the back of your neck stand up, or goosebumps up and down your arms. And at that point, you know that there's a higher soul around you, and they're either protecting you from an entity or they're trying to communicate something to you. But I found that at that point, like if you can get into enthusiasm or unconditional love, then you've changed your vibration altogether, and an entity can't even find you then, because they're not on that vibration. They don't resonate on that vibration. And it's like, but when you do feel goosebumps, I'm not saying that there's not entities around, but I'm saying there's a higher soul that's moved in.
Have you noticed that there's 2 types of goosebumps? Have you noticed that sometimes you have this real icky feeling and you have the goosebumps? Like if you go downtown and you go down the wrong road down here, and all of a sudden you feel danger and the hair comes up the back of your head and you get the goosebumps all over, and you have to get out. That's one kind. Then the other kind is a very gentle, very sweet where you just get a rush of just a real good feeling about what's going on. That's a different matter. So there's 2 types here that we should be aware of, I believe. Keith, I think you're next. Keith, I think you're next.
Yeah, I've been wondering for a long time. When I was younger, I bumped into people who played around with Ouija boards and things like that. And I used to get a shiver right up the spine It just said, just keep away from this. And just went about to shiver up the spine, like a cold, you know. That's the same sort of thing. So I just kept right away from that sort of stuff.
That's the negative goosebumples. Okay, one other thing, a question that I need to answer. How about excessive amounts of nutrients? And Brooke, now this is something I want you to think about. From one position, if you take excessive amounts of B vitamins, you can throw your body out of kilter and out of balance. If you take an excessive amount of minerals, excessive amount, over a period of time, you can throw your body out of kilter chemically. Okay? The same thing is true if you take excessive amounts of enzymes. Let's say you're taking your food enzymes, not your food enzymes, your lymphatic enzymes, and you go into a releasing too much sugar into the body, okay, and you release too much sugar by the activity of the amylase working on the complex carbohydrate. So you end up with high blood sugar and can go into a diabetic coma where you're wandering around in a daze, not really knowing who you are or what you're doing, and you can't think and you can't talk. And you have people doing this occasionally by overdosing on those enzymes. And this is where you smell sometimes like a urine, you know, like your ammonia smell. You have to be careful of that. Now, this is wherein I want you to be wise, and in answer to one of the questions, it's far better to be consistent and firm in taking what you're taking, rather than trying to do it all at one time. Now, I mentioned before, like with niacin, if you think a little bit's going to help you, you end up taking a whole lot, and then you sit there and burn for days, you know, several hours. I don't think that's necessary. I know of one person one time that did happen to. This man brought his daughter in, who was a teller in the bank, and he was a bank president. Brought his wife into Chicago, and I told her about the niacin, and she had a big black scarf rim, like I showed you up here on the slides. And she decided she was going to really take about a level teaspoon of niacin all at one time. She burned solidly for 45 minutes, and her scarf rim disappeared. It was no longer black. It was just really had disappeared. But she turned purple during that time. She couldn't talk. She shook. Anybody ever shake with niacin? Okay. She shook. She couldn't breathe, and she was breathing heavy, and her heart was palpitating and one thing or another. And she was cold, ice cold all over, like she had a bad case of malaria. Okay, too much niacin to start with. If a little bit's going to help me, then I'll take a whole lot. I would say the same thing is true with your enzymes. The same thing, Brooke, would be true with your minerals. Because I believe if you overdose on those things and take far too much, you can overload the body and have a chemical imbalance which can create hallucinatory effects. You don't take 30 a day anymore. Okay, I think that's fair. But sometimes you see some pretty funny things from overdosing, and we have to be wise in this area. Peter, did you want to say something on this matter from your experience? Pardon me? Have you ever been spaced out? Yes, you have been spaced out. You've had it happen, but that's just normal activity for you. Okay. Peter, would you share your knowledge in this area from your experience, sir?
I think we're all responsible for ourselves, and the main thing is keeping control of what we're doing. In the sports world, there's all sorts of stimulants and vitamins and injections used, but they build it up. But then, in that case, everything's monitored. The pulse is monitored every morning, the blood pressure's monitored, the weight of the athlete is monitored, and it's done in a very, very slow upgrade of what they're taking. And if they take a new product, it's usually from probably from a medical advice too, and that's still used in a very gradual dose. But you'll always get some characters that will, their ego takes them beyond that, and they'll just overdose. Because they've set in their mindset that they have to achieve something, and the ego forces them past their own intelligence to do that. And I think John has always said, take it steady with the supplements, and if you're going to increase them, I think you should increase them very, very slowly, and monitor what's going on. Niacin's always been a problem because people get mixed up with the dose. And it's usually not the niacin, it's the food intake or the other minerals or some other substance, lack of protein or lack of carbohydrate or even lack of water that'll stop it having a flush. And then when everything's right and they get a flush, they think, oh, they've found the dose, and the next time they do that, it's probably too much. If you're taking tablets and you chew the tablet, well, that's assimilated straight away and you can usually get a flush. But there's all sorts of factors that's happening inside the body. And the chemistry of the body does change from day to day. Well, healing crisis is your payback time for all the money and effort you've spent. So so you need to do that with care. But some people get desperate to have a healing crisis and they start doing things out of the norm when it's really probably their mental process that they're not taking care of, or other forces. You can certainly force a healing crisis by chemistry, but then you're only going to get a result from the chemistry. And from the way I look at it, if a person's kidneys or liver or some other organ's below par, and you go in heavily with chemistry, then that can have an effect. But there's the emotional body too you've got to think about. And there's the mental body. And you really can't achieve it from a chemistry point of view. I mean, chemistry won't fix anything really. It'll help the organ, but it's only helping it to a point where the emotions can be handled, and then, as John has said many times, that it's on the mental plane that we really get to terms with it. But I spoke to John this morning. If we didn't have supplements, and you couldn't overdose because you couldn't eat that much food that would bring more of the vitamins and minerals into the body. You just couldn't eat twice or third or fourth times the amount of food. The fact that we've got it in concentrated form, we need to respect that. Because you can overdose on anything. And but some people want things to happen too quick. And if you're prepared to wait and be patient and look at all the other factors, well, then you can get there. And then when you get that result and you know now how you've achieved it, then you can keep on achieving it. But if you haven't monitored what you're doing and something comes up, then that brings confusion because you don't really know how you achieve that. You're in a situation and you haven't got records of how you got into that situation, so then you're lost the next time. So it's each one's individual responsibility to monitor what you're doing and keep a check of everything you're doing. That's liquid intake, that's food intake, that's your supplement intake. But it's very easy, isn't it, to stick a spoon in some powder and to increase it. Well, the enzymes are very potent. They really are. Yeah. Doesn't matter what form they're in. If they're done to an extent, well, then the body has to cope with that, and that takes energy from the body to do that too. But the main thing with a healing crisis is it's the same with someone coming into trauma. What is actually happening is that their energy that was placed back in time when the trauma was laid down, it's coming into present time. And all the energy is there for the healing crisis. And if a person goes into a rage, he's got super strength because at that moment all his emotions are coming into present time. He's got all his energy available. But of course he hasn't cleared it, so then it goes back in the time when it was laid down. So when you're on the table and it's coming up that you're bringing it into the present time, you're actually bringing your energy that you've laid down through the trauma and the judgments in that time, and you bring it together so you've got all the energy to work for you. Some people do that away from point holding. That's what instant healing is. When they can bring all their judgments off, and they can bring all their attachments off, and they can bring it all into present time, and then they've got all that energy to deal with the problem. But just trying to do it with chemistry is not bringing everything into present time to help it. So it's a one-sided effect you've brought in. You've brought it in with chemistry, and you haven't brought the other in too. You need to bring it all in together. That's the physical body and the emotional body and the mental body all together to bring it into present time. If you bring one forward without the other, and then you're out of balance. I think that'll do.
Thank you very much. Very clear, very clear. Appreciate that very much. Now, I don't want to deprive anybody from the opportunity of clearing the air here with their comments that they want to speak. I know some of you have been holding stuff back for 2 or 3 days. I want you to share now. Pardon me?
Oh, is that? Sorry.
That's all right.
Following on from the dowsing, I've not much experience with kinesiology as yet, and I just wondered how possible it was for the body to actually influence the results of the tests that you make.
There is no question that kinesiology can be influenced by the person who's doing the testing. And that's why you have to come from a position of pure integrity that the testing may be valid. But if you're coming from a position of prejudice, then that is going to prejudice the outcome of the kinesiology, and you have to be exceedingly careful. Does that answer your question?
Okay, when we were talking about could you do nutrients, nutritional supplements too much, does it matter what spirit the thing's done in? Like, could someone be an intensity freak and using nutritional aids as a way to feel?
The person may be as sincere as anybody could be, and they can still overdose, they can still overdose and have sometimes quite adverse consequences of overstimulating the body with various vitamins, call it what you like, and or other substances, even minerals and enzymes. So you have to be exceedingly careful as to how you use these things. Donna?
I think, if you were to use them with perhaps the wrong motivation, consciously or unconsciously, could you be inviting in entities under those circumstances?
You're going to have to give me more specific details on what the conditions are.
Okay, if somebody's using, knowing what the nutritional supplement does and knows that it kicks them into something pretty intense, could they, knowing that most of us don't know what our true motivations are, could they use that and kick themselves into an intense reaction, being just because they're an intensity freak, so to speak, and bring an entity involvement? I mean, does our motivation for why we're doing something have any effect as to whether we're bringing in entities or not? Maybe that's...
I don't know at the present time. I'm not clear on the question. See, I'm not clear on the question. The motivation we have is one thing, but that's conscious.
Okay.
Okay? And you're not leaving a hole in the aura by having a motivation, shall we say, that's out of alignment. I would say that down the track, that could lead to a situation where we are in an unconscious state, which could lead one to a situation where there's a hole in the aura. But I don't think I could just give you an unequivocal yes or no in answer to your question.
That pretty well answers it. But do you do our unconscious motivations, because don't we usually have a multiplicity of motivations at any one time?
We all have. We all have reactive mechanisms which give us these unconscious motivations of which we're not aware. That's our programming.
Okay, and do those have are we controlled basically as far as whether we're inviting entities in or not only by our conscious choices, or do our unconscious choices also have an effect on that?
We already have the entities by our unconscious choices, by the fact that the holes in the auric field are already there genetically. We already have them. And so the answer would be yes to that. Okay? Okay. Matthew.
I have a question concerning a certain scenario which involves entities and muscle testing. Say you're going upscale because you're on a good nutritional program, you're approaching a healing crisis, you have an entity in you, this entity has a good idea that this next healing crisis is going to kick it out, and you're being muscle tested as to what is raising you upscale and what's not. Could that entity influence the muscle testing?
The answer to that, I believe, would be a definite yes. Okay, it's like this. You ever see the old Western movies, and any of the old Western movies, and everyone's sitting around there having their baked beans, and they're sitting there very comfortable. And, of course, the stagecoach has already taken off and is around going up here. And then they get up, the old boys get up, and they're going to raid the stagecoach. And so they head them off at the bend. But they very quietly know exactly where they're going. The stagecoach is well armed, no problem whatsoever. And then the old boys, they go off here, and they cut across country, and they head off the stagecoach right at the bend and get their gold or whatever it is. Now, inside of our bodies, the spirits are like that. They have a good communication system going on, and they have a pretty good idea on what you're going to do with your life. And so they sit back and they wait and wait and wait for just the right moment, and then whack, you've had the schnitzel. And you wonder, well, how did that happen? Because they already are aware of what you're going to be doing and what you're probably inclined to do, and they can just bang you like that and take you off the track for a while. And their purposes are pretty well fulfilled because now you can't continue on the path you were on. Now that is how they operate. And they do operate that way, and here is where you have to have your commitment and intent to follow on through no matter what, when this type of a situation does occur. And they do occur. Oh, that's fine. I'm tired of entities. Go ahead, Vivian.
If one's working on one's flow sheet and one's got all these points, for example, like the thyroid, etc., that one's got to do, does one only do these points once and then it's okay? Or how does one know, when it's done?
You take a look at the intensity in the iris of the eye, like in the pituitary, big black blotch, okay? I would put 4 X's by it. 4 X's mean that's top priority. And so you don't work it one time, you work it over and over again until it clears up. But you may have very little to show in the thyroid. So you might put 1 X by the thyroid. But you go down to the thymus, and the thymus is shot, so you put 4 X's by the thymus. And you have to make a kind of a judgmental idea as to the intensity of the problem that you see in the eye, and then put down what you honestly believe. Here, you've really got to work on this. And then, of course, 2 months, 3 months later, you recheck things out again and find out what's the progress you're making. And then you find out that there has been some progress made, no question, but you still have mostly the same problems, only they're not quite as severe. And you still then realize you still have to have 4 X's there because you're not getting the thymus straightened out yet, because you haven't got the heart taken care of, or you haven't got the pancreas and adrenals taken care of, or you haven't taken care of the spleen yet. That's holding back all the progress, and maybe you haven't got all your numbness out, and you haven't had your gonads, held properly. Okay? Now you be careful about point holding. That has many implications for you. Okay? Okay, Vivian? All right. I'm glad we can have a good sense of humor. Any questions on this now? Oh, yes. Okay. Just a lot of patience and a lot of sense of humor, and everything's going to turn out all right eventually. Any questions here now? Jim, I'm sorry.
I had a bit more of a comment than a question. This is kind of back to what you were asking for, Tom. Yeah, right, the yin and yang. No, it's more on when you experience, are you in danger by going on the program? I guess I'll tell you a bit about my experience. When I kind of came back from Maui, for the next couple of years after that, things get really loosened up. Things happen, extreme highs, extreme lows happen. And at that time, I think it's really, really important to kind of stick to principle, or know what the principles are and know what happens, because there are things out there in the universe at extreme high and extreme low points. And I found, sitting in my study, I found golden lights that come in that say, do this. And
you had that happen, Jim?
Yeah.
Oh, you understand firsthand experience?
Yeah, I do.
Attaboy.
Yeah, I do.
Those are wild when those things happen, I'll tell you.
There's been a couple times like that, and I really didn't know one way or the other. Really didn't know. And I was in a real, I got kind of shivers up and down my spine just thinking about it right now, in a real state where I don't really know what's right and left. I don't know what's up and down. I don't know what to really latch my hand onto, except for the principles. Exactly, like John's talking about, touching people, saying, this is a real good one that really worked for me. Does something tell you what to do, or does something show you correct principle, or in some way teach you correct principle? That was a real important one for me on determining what exactly I'm hearing, what the value is of what I'm hearing. I also want to say one other thing on that too. I said before, I talked about this a bit before, but I want to kind of talk about it again. When I kind of came up and said, you can manifest things you want, you can actually get, this is also to you too, you can think about what you want. I kind of use the word intend what you want. There's a real danger to that. You can actually get sucked into some vortex you really don't want to be in, and you will not, personal experience, you won't find out about it till it's well past the point when you should have made a left turn or a right turn in there. When I said what I meant when I said you can intend something, what I had going in my brain is what I do for myself, and it always works to me that it's not to my own betterment, but I give the prayer out. Is this for my highest and best good, for growth? Does this benefit the people around me? And is this God's will? I actually start with, is this God's will, and then work down through. And then kind of get to the point of, in a sense, non-resistance, where I don't care if this happens or if that doesn't happen. And then with kind of that, it's hard to describe, but with that, Yeah, with the principle, with a kind of little desireless desire, just try to say this is the road I would go down if given my choice. And I think that's exerting I actually think it's exerting a will out there in the same way that you draw a breath of air. At least that's the way I look at it. And the way I've come to that conclusion is by going down a path where I have to kind of back out of it, because I realize I've gone down a path that is limiting, it's spiraling in the wrong direction. I back out and say, okay, I know now how to not make that left turn. I know when that juicy apple is out there, don't take the easy path. I guess that's the quickest, easiest thing I could say. And that's really back to your question, which was, 10 years ago was kind of a question for me. How do you know if you're doing the right thing or not? After a while, you get kind of a gut instinct that is it too easy? If it's too easy, it just might not be the right thing to do at all. So.
That's my roomie. That is my roommate.
I was going to tell you this later, but I thought I might as well share it with everybody here. Yeah, we can. But I wanted to make that clear. I think I've miscommunicated a little bit. When you can get anything you want to get, you have to really watch what you want to get and how you want to get it, too. And it's not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's for instance, I'm going through something right now. There's somebody in my company who is not in the right position. They're not happy. Everybody around them is not happy. So what I am working on is, how can this guy be happy? How can I be happy? How can everybody else in the organization be happy?
Your company back there, not your company like that.
Yeah, you guys are all in the right place. Not a question about it. And I feel I'm in the right place here, too. Okay, so I wanted to try to, if I could, take a second and kind of clear that up a little bit, because it's real easy to get kind of sucked down the wrong road there without realizing, without getting a signpost to say, I'm too far down. But the key for me has been, after going and coming, the key for me is it too easy? Is it still work? I don't think there's any point that we get to in life where it starts getting easier. Unfortunately, what I found is it only gets tougher and tougher. The more you master, you said this real eloquently before, and I'm not sure how you said it, the more challenges you overcome, the more you're given. And when it starts getting easier, maybe that's not the path you want to be on. At least that's a signpost I found to really clearly look at it.
Jim, the truth of the matter is, do you consider yourself a pioneer?
Let me answer that this way. I'm trying really not to get an ego trip going. That's actively one of the things I try in life.
Do you know how you can measure the success, though, of a pioneer?
I would say by how far he goes out beyond the existing guideposts.
By the number of arrows in his back.
Depends who shot him, doesn't it? I think we're all pioneers in the sense that we go out there and we do things that we're not really sure about. For me, that melanin protein complex thing make a heck of a lot of sense. It was a real revelation. I told
Did
somebody.
You get the books yet?
I've actually borrowed one from Clive, and I'm reading that before the other ones were done. Thank you, Clive.
Hold on. The other ones, I think, are done, aren't they?
Well, we're in the process of it. They're almost done.
Almost done. Okay, good. Go ahead, sir. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Okay. The thing I was going to say on that is, I've been doing point holding for a while, and I told somebody else this. I view kind of the information on the melanin, the potential of the information on the melanin protein complex. I'm a little nervous. Well, anyway, it seems in a certain sense it's kind of like the first scientific evidence of proving the existence of God. If you think about it in a wide way. There's a parallel in there, and I thought, well, gee, this is really great, this is really exciting, and then the next thought I had is, gee, that means we're not going on faith anymore. What's wrong? There's a certain point wrong where we got to kind of sit back and say, let's prove everything in the hard physical universe without going on faith at all. And I kind of felt bad about that. You guys are actually we are all, not you guys, we are all in a very good position now, because a lot of the stuff that John's talking about and is coming out now is proven, and it's presented in a real nice, easy to follow way. I mean, it's all painful and it's very hard, but it's a lot easier than it has been. And when we talk about morphogenetic changes, or 4 leaves on a plant versus 3 leaves, there's a path that has been prepared out there that goes a heck of a lot longer, farther out there than I can see. So in that sense, no, I'm not a pioneer at all. But the path is a heck of a lot easier for myself now, and I'm really grateful for that, and I think for all of us too. And I guess the melanin protein complex information hopefully allows us to go 10 times further beyond that. Now that we have a guidepost, and not use it as a crutch in the sense that, okay, we got one thing proved, let's not go past that point. Anyway, I don't want to take up too much time, but I kind of want to get that point across about when you're going too far and how you know where you're going and that sort of thing.
Thank you, Jim.
John, you've brought up different ways for us to tell basically who we're talking to, but I'm very curious, if you call on the name of God to either surround you with presence or ask a question or ask for guidance or whatever, he's not going to let a demon come in there if you're calling on the name of God, is he?
Not necessarily. But the thing is, if you are calling upon the name of God and then breaking a law of God at the same time, then you have no protection.
Calling on the name of God before you're taking action for guidance or prayer or protection.
And even then, if you break a law of God after that, you still don't get the protection. This is the part that's hard for a lot of people, because they say, well, I've asked God for guidance, and now I'm going to do this, but if this is counterproductive, you're going to get your hands slapped.
Okay.
We can ask for guidance as much as we want, but we haven't learned we haven't learned our lessons yet. This takes time to come about. Okay, does this clear the air for a lot of people on a lot of different things that we had questions on? Okay, we're going to get all of our iridology done, and we're going to get all of our sclerology done eventually. But it's all going to happen, and I do appreciate your patience with each other. I appreciate your patience with the questions, and hopefully we're all learning from this as we move along. How many of you can feel the increase of the intensity of the classes? Okay? As you are going through your changes mentally, where the activity here, with all the tremendous power that's been released here, and you're doing it, then the intelligence will just keep soaring, and your ability to grasp things will come more and more, to where next week I'm afraid the point holding is going to be like horses out of control, and I hope we can keep the reins on things. Things have been very, very intense, and I've been kind of pulling back on the reins a little bit so things don't get totally out of control. We've had a few little isolated situations here, and I just want you to be careful. I want you to be, the race is not to the swift, but to those who endure to the end. And I want you to just stay with it, steady and sure, and within the framework of reality and certainty, and not go off half-cocked here or half-cocked there, where sometimes we do, and we're all in that category of being. What would happen if we did this, or what would happen if we did that? Be very careful, and don't think that if you're going to wander down by the lake, don't think that you're impervious to the snakes that are down there. You follow what I'm saying? How many have seen a few down there? May I see a show of hands? Okay, you know what I'm talking about. You got to be careful. Okay, let's have
Did you guys do this one before? Have we done that one? New one? Okay. What we have in this slide, we have a left eye, and this is going to be a cancer. Can anybody tell me where that'll be? It's a left eye. Left eye. Esophagus, yes. This would be a cancer in the esophagus. Right smack there. If you look in your eye chart, that's pretty well exactly where the esophagus is going to show up in the Jensen chart. If you look at the Jensen chart, the esophagus basically goes from about 8:45 to 9 o'clock, which is pretty well we're right where that is. So we've got an esophageal cancer right in this area. Okay, next slide. You all know what your esophagus is, I hope. Your food tube? Okay. Okay, we got ourselves a right eye, And if you look at this area right here, this is going to be in the area of the throat. This entire area where you've got all the black sand in through here. You all see that? Note in particular, you've got a few other areas like that where you have these kind of bands of black sand coming in like that from zone 6 all the way into about zone 3. You got these 3 different bands right here that we want to work on. Y'all see all those? Okay, next. Yeah. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is going to be another esophageal cancer, cancer of the esophagus. You'll notice how dark black that pigment spot is right there. Y'all see that? Okay, notice also you've got the indicating line in the sclera that's kind of forking and pointing into roughly that area. We'll get into the sclerology a little bit later, sometime anyways. Maybe? Okay. Well, actually, I should mention something, folks. We've already made it through about twice as many slides as we made it through in the Iridology week last year, so. But, cheer up. We got 6 weeks, so we may be doing some nighttime slides as the time wears down. I'm sure we'll be happy to dispose of the black plastic after tomorrow. But we only made it through about 2 trays of slides last year. And that wasn't even during the Iridology week. That was continuing on into cranial and all the rest. So we're doing, well, we'll probably be doing some more slides in the weeks to come at night. Slides at night. Well, that way we don't have to leave the black plastic up. Okay. What do we got here? Probably something out in the spleen or liver area right here. And if you look through this area of the eye very carefully, what do you see there? If you look through this area right here, what do you see there? Okay, what else do you see there in this slide up here? Okay, do you see this transversal right here coming across? Do you see it now? Can we get those lights? Can we get those lights a little dimmer so people can see this? Follow right across here. You see this coming across along here? It's a little tough to see it everywhere, but you can certainly see it right there, the transversal. Can you see that? It's actually another one right here that's quite pink in color. Do you see this? What you're looking for, the reason that this should stand out is for 2 reasons. It's obviously not going the direction that fibers ought to be going. I mean, fibers ought to be going this way, right? And this is going smack across like that. But you'll also notice when you compare these blood vessels to the fibers, they're thicker. They're thicker than the fibers. So, for example, this may be a blood vessel right in here. But this is what you got to watch out for, is the transversals, the ones that are running across the fibers there. So there's going to be a weakness in that whole part of the body, and you'll notice the transversals going right through this area where you've got the pigment spot. Next slide. Question? Let's get it on the mic right there.
What should be of greater concern, the mucoprotein buildup areas or the thinning fibers?
The transversal, you mean, or the
just in general.
Say that one more time.
When you're looking at priorities, if you see extremely heavy mucoprotein buildup, is that more an area of concern than the thinning fiber area where black starts showing through?
They can both be a pretty big concern.
Equally?
Yeah. I would, if I saw a really, really bad fiber structure where things were really recessed and black and wavy and that sort of thing, I'd probably be a bit more concerned with that. But the thing about it is, Karen, is that a lot of times when you have the mucoprotein buildup, you have a lot of really bad fiber structures. You just can't see them because the mucoprotein is kind of masking them. So oftentimes they're going to go hand in glove. If you think about it this way, if you've got fiber levels that are going very, very dark and black and moving to the back, what does that say about the condition of the body at the cellular level? It's not very good. It's way down at level 7. So what does that say about like the nerve supply and the circulation to the tissues? Not very good. The level of vitality in the tissues and all the rest. it's not going to be, it's going to be none too good. What does it say if you've got mucoprotein? How would that affect the circulation to the tissues? It's going to be the same thing in that you're not going to have a very good, you're not going to have a very good supply there. If you've got the mucoprotein buildup, what are you not getting out to the cells when you've got a mucoprotein buildup? You're not getting nutrients out to the cells as effectively, and what are you not getting back away from the cells as effectively? The toxins. So if you've got a heavy mucoprotein buildup, that's going to contribute to death at the cellular level, because you have the combination basically of cells that are going to be undernourished and drowning in their own waste products, which is not such a good combination. Okay. At any rate, here in this eye, you've got this individual complained of one symptom in particular, which was foot cramps. And you see this pigment spot right in that area. Some of your pigment spots move around a little bit. You can see this one moving up there. That makes the iridology a little bit difficult because you're trying to decide where it is and it keeps moving around on you. Yeah, that's for moving point holding. Okay. At any rate, there'd be some problems down in the foot area. Now, one of the reasons I would bring this up is this: if you've got if you're in a point holding situation and people are not really being very attentive to detail in terms of reading the people's eyes before you do any point holding on them, you could run into some serious trouble here, because what might you have there in the foot? It is possible to get cancer in the foot. It's not maybe all that common, but what's going to happen? I mean, under most circumstances, we don't think anything of plugging right in on a person's foot, find the pain and push and all that sort of thing. And 99% of the time, that's not really going to be much of a problem, is it? But you get that, that one out of how many that have that might actually have a serious problem in the foot. You could do some real damage to that person with point holding in the foot, and you'd want to be very, very careful. Now, this might not be a cancer because it's not incredibly dark, but all the same, we've seen plenty of eye slides here that had pigment spots that were roughly this dark that we know were cancer. So you have to consider that that's a very, very real possibility that there would be a cancer in the foot there. Okay, why don't we get? Well, I would certainly work with the STO points to get the nerve supply and circulation back to the body. And seeing as this is a right eye, I might be on the cautious side about holding points on that foot, and I might probably tend to stick to their left foot for the point holding early on. And I would kind of watch that spot. Now, this might not be anything to worry about. We don't really know, but you could examine the foot and kind of get a sense of what's going on in there. That might be very, very helpful. Okay, next slide there. Okay, this is an individual who had polio, particularly in the right leg, where there were a lot of problems and underdevelopment in the right leg. And if you look at the right leg, you've got all this kind of nonsense here. But look what you've also got in the 0-degree reflex. You've got the whole cecum area right in here. You see that? Okay, now obviously there's a few other things we might want to take care of. Like, for example, what might this be right here? And this would be a right eye, so the esophagus would be a very strong possibility. That's fairly dark right in there, right? Now, what might this be right here? What area of the body might that be right there? Okay, that could be in the back area. Do we have any other things we see here? Possibly the lungs right out in that area. You see that brown spot? Pituitary would be a very, very good possibility right up there. We can probably squeeze out a few more here, but there's obviously a lot of pigment spots. Why don't we hit the next one? Okay, this individual, I don't have the whole, I just got some brief notes from John here, so I'm not really sure of the whole story in this individual, but as far as I can tell from the notes, this individual had quite a severe problem in the femur, which is the upper part of the thigh. Now, if you look at the leg, where's it going to show up in the eye chart? About 6 o'clock, and where will the thigh show up? What zone? Roughly up in about zone 3, so this is pretty well going to be right in the exact area of the thigh right here. Okay, next slide. Okay, we got ourselves a right eye what might this be right in this area? Okay, liver's quite a strong possibility right in through there. And what about this right here? Pancreas, I would say for certain. So we obviously, now, normally in body electronics with your endocrine points, what's the first gland that you'd normally work on in people? Okay, what's the first thing we do is what? Okay, STO. Then our next priority is the endocrine system. What's the normal order in the endocrine system if there's nothing unusual about the individual? Okay, top down, meaning pineal, hypothalamus, pituitary, and so on. What are the two exceptions to this? Okay, pancreas and heart. What would be two reasons to do pancreas as an exception in this individual? Okay, the fact that the pancreas itself is pretty well shot, but also very definitely the fact that you've got the cancer there. The pancreas is going to be a major priority in anybody that you suspect might have cancer. Why would that be? Lewis, thank you. The pancreas is going to secrete your chymotrypsin, which will do what? It'll eat up the abnormal tissue. So we very definitely got to work on the pancreas anytime we've got the abnormal tissue there. Donna? I think there's a mic with your name on it there. It's the one that says just cross out the Tana and just, that's it. Just change a couple letters.
Dealing with as much as variation as there is, could that also be the appendix?
This right in that area, yes, that would be, Donna. Very good. That would be a possibility. I would strongly suspect pancreas, but it's quite possible that could be your appendix. Usually, the phrase I've heard is when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras. So usually the first thing you do is try to go right where it would be on the chart, and then if that doesn't work, you start looking for some other possibilities. There's been things in like in Mags and my eyes where we've looked at each other's eyes for like 8 years. I mean, there's been things I'm not sure we've figured out yet as far as like what exactly they are in the eye. So you have to understand that it's not as simple as slapping a grid up there and immediately saying this is this and this is this and this is this, because you got to ask a lot of questions, and you're gonna run into situations from time to time. Like when you've done eye readings, Mag, how many times have you had people where you'd ask them, like, you'd pick everything out on the chart? Come on up and have a seat here. The kids still got to go to bed, or you? Yeah, take advantage. So, how many times have you done eye readings where you'd look at a spot in the eye and you'd ask like questions like over and over, like everything that was remotely close to that in the chart, and still come up empty?
Yeah, quite a few times, and it might even be a really pretty remarkable spot, and they just can't come up with anything. But you know what else sometimes happens? Another thing that happens a lot of times is you'll ask people, and they'll say, "Oh no, I didn't have any of that. Oh no, I didn't have any of that." And then later on, they'll say, "Oh yeah, but there was that time when I had my lungs cave in, and I had to have go to the hospital." Is there anything? Did you ever have anything with your lungs? No.
Amazing the things people forget.
It's just a level of unconsciousness. So you just have to go with what you see and what you feel. Kind of intuitively what you feel. And as you get more experience, you'll see that certain spots will definitely repeat themselves. As the pancreas or as the kidney or whatever. You'll see patterns.
That type of shape there, I think, would also suggest pancreas, wouldn't you say? So that's most likely what you're going to have there. We'll get the situation a lot too, where we'll have done an eye reading on somebody and not been able to really figure out just what it is, but we'll have a real strong hunch, like I really think that's your shoulder there that we're looking at, and the person will be like, "Oh no, never had any problems, nothing wrong with the shoulder," and then you'll see the person in another seminar, 6 months later or whatever, and they'll all of a sudden go, about a month after I had that eye reading and I was on the program, all of a sudden I got all this pain in my shoulder, and all of a sudden I remember that time that I hit that rock and went flying over the handlebars and busted up my shoulder. It's quite amazing the things that people can forget. So don't get discouraged when you're starting out and first doing eye readings. When we got back in first year we were doing seminars back in '88, we kind of got thrown into the fire there because neither of us had really done a huge amount of eye readings, and we were out doing weekend seminars, and we'd sometimes have to do like 20, 30 eye readings, someplace where we'd only be there for 4 or 5 days, and you just get out there and you really kind of, it's like on the job training with the eye readings, and you're not always going to be able to figure everything out. And I know for myself, when I first started out, that used to bother me. It used to bother me that I couldn't figure everything out. It used to kind of bother me that I didn't have all the answers. And I actually, as the longer I've done iridology, it's getting to the point where it really doesn't bother me at all, because I realize that you can't always know. There's going to be plenty of things that you're not going to know what they are in the iris. And in my opinion, the worst type of iridologist is the one that's too sure of him or herself. That's the worst type of iridologist out there, the one where everything's set in stone and they'll just immediately say this is this and this is this and this is this, because they don't really leave anything open, because there's all sorts of possibilities there.
You have to figure, if you're doing an eye reading on somebody, maybe you spend an hour, 2 hours, up to 3 hours, like John and Anita do in the Cook Islands, but 2 of those hours sometimes are just spent educating them on their diet and on the supplements. So you're not really going to be spending that much time on going over each little detail and each little zone. You definitely want to hit the hot spots, and you want to get those points so that you don't miss anything. You don't want to mess around with certain things that have been pointed out to you. But ultimately, most everybody's going to be on basically the same supplements, and a lot of your time is just going to be explaining them to the clients.
A thing you might want to consider here, as far as people getting on a nutritional program, may I ask a very, very simple question here to this wonderful body of people here. How many of you are doing more than 15 different supplements a day? Okay, we got what? 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 people. Okay, that's 5 out of 100. How many of you are doing more than 10 different supplements a day? Okay, so we got maybe if we're lucky, about 15 or 20 people that are doing more than 10. Okay? So how many of you are doing 5 to 10 different supplements a day? Okay, that's most of you there. How many of you are doing 5 or less? Okay, even a few there. So just consider this. If here we have a group of 100 people that have traveled from all over the entire planet to be here, right? Do you think the average individual that you put on a program is going to have the same level of commitment that you folks have? It's going to be a lesser level of commitment, right? And yet even here, cream of the crop, if you don't mind my saying so, there's virtually nobody doing more than 10 different supplements, right? So think about that. So when you're putting people on these wonderful programs and checking off 50 different items, you have to be a little bit realistic and realize that they're not going to do most of what you tell them to do, right? So as Mag said here, when it really comes down to it, most of what people are going to do is going to be minerals and enzymes and flax oil and grain fields and what have you. It's going to be the basics. So you have to really, you have to be a little bit practical about this too. Because bottom line, if you guys aren't doing 20 or 30 different supplements, there's no way that most of the people you put on programs are going to do that sort of thing. How many of you here have ever done, on any consistent basis, say 20 or 25 different supplements in a day? Lewis? I don't even see Brooke's hand up, so just... Janine, okay. Janine and Lewis. So just consider about that. I'm a very practical person, and I look at doing an eye reading on somebody as it's more than just trying to figure out what's there. I mean, the purpose of doing an eye reading on somebody is not to impress them with how much you know. It's not to dazzle them with brilliance and figure out all the things there. To me, because what good has it done a person if you do this absolutely wonderful eye reading and you absolutely know every single thing you see in the eye, and then they walk away and don't do a single thing? Like, what's been accomplished? You've had an exchange of time and money, but that's about it. Nothing's really been accomplished because the person's not going to do anything. So to me, it's like a lot of what you're doing in iridology, it goes way beyond just trying to figure out, what this is or what this is or what this is. You have to inspire people. You've got a serious job here when you're out there reading eyeballs. You have to get through to those people as individuals. You have to come from the heart, and you have to be able to understand the person's motivations. One of the things I would recommend very, very strongly that you all learn is personology. How many of you know what personology is? Okay, what's personology, Mag?
Well, personology is the study of the structure of the body, particularly the face, to determine personality. And Dr. Robert Whiteside, who we just actually heard recently passed on, he lived in Maui, Hawaii. He made it his life mission to study this and actually scientifically prove that certain features and certain distances of the features on the face would represent certain personality characteristics. And it's based on the old Chinese physiognomy, if anybody's heard of that. And so what he had, 98 traits?
93.
93 traits that he did studies on and set up an institute. And
how much time would it take Dr. Whiteside to read A Perfect Stranger and totally tell him?
About 3 minutes. He could tell you exactly what that person was doing, where they were headed, what they were best suited for occupation. And what he believed was that the structure determines the person's
reactive patterns.
And he didn't believe that changed much over a lifetime, that pretty much people just stayed the same until he met Dr. Ray, and he found, had some discourse, and they found that Dr. Ray shared with him that during cranial, people's heads changed and the shape of their faces changed and the distance of their eyes changed. And so what Dr. Whiteside did was he came out to some seminars that we had, and he did readings before we had cranials and readings after. And
very precise physical measurements.
Yeah, these are measurements. I mean, they used little rulers and everything. And he found that there were very marked changes. Sometimes on a scale, it would go all the way from one end of the scale down at like 5% all the way up to the other end of the scale. And what he found over and over again was after a cranial, a person's psychic ability and intuitive ability very often would increase.
Now, how would a basic understanding of personology help you in doing an iridology reading?
Well, when you can determine if a person is going to maybe be consistent in their actions, or if they're the kind of person that is skeptical, or if they're the kind of person that's practical, then you can understand how they're going to follow a program and how they will follow through, particularly.
The thing about it is this, the same shoe doesn't fit all feet. You have to learn to approach people as individuals. You might have one individual, for example, that has very, very close set eyes. Okay? You look around the room here when we get the lights on for a minute. Let's see from the side. Go find a good one. Find a good one. Okay, one trait you can look at is your how far apart are the eyes. If you compare the distance, like take a person's eye and look at the distance. We got one? Okay. Take the distance in the eye from like the inside corner to the outside corner, right? And compare that distance, inside corner to outside corner, compare that with the distance from here to here, okay? Now look around at the different people. A person who's average, you'll find that the distance between the two inside corners will be basically the same distance as from here to here. Okay, that's like average. That's 50th percentile. You look around the room, you're going to find some individuals have very close set eyes. Very, very close set eyes, where they're much, much closer together than average. You'll find other individuals whose eyes are very, very, very broad set. Let's see Clive there. Take off the glasses there. Okay, Clive's eyes would be a little bit on the close set side. So, in Clive's case, this personology term is what's known as tolerance. And it's not tolerance in the sense of bigotry or anything like that. It's in the sense of like from an engineering standpoint. You know what you mean? You know what it means in engineering when you have zero tolerance? How's she doing there, Peter? Yeah. Yeah, pause for just a moment. What you'll find on this one trait is you'll have some individuals, like for example Clive there, the eyes will be a little bit more close set than would be average. So what this would mean from Clive's perspective is that he wants things to be right. Like in other words, if something's a little bit off, if something's not quite right, he's going to notice it, right? That's going to be his tendency. Now you take somebody who's got, let's see, Jane. Okay, stand up and let people get a look at you. Now look at Jane's eyes there. You see how her eyes are somewhat broad set? You know, they're further apart than average. So in Jane's case, if you don't dot a few I's or cross a few T's, she's not really going to mind all that much, right? You can skip on some of the little details and that sort of thing, right? It's not going to be important. So let's just say you're doing an eye reading on a guy like Clive. Is he going to want a lot of information and a lot of detail? If you slip up on one little thing, is this going to tend to invalidate the rest of the stuff you say? Okay? So you get somebody like that with close set eyes, you got to be on your best behavior when you're doing an eye reading. Okay? You got to make sure you get all your facts right, because it may, if you mess up on one little thing and he happens to know that you messed up on it, that's going to, he's going to have to really work through to make, that's going to make him look doubly hard at everything else you had to say. Whereas with Jane, she's not going to need all the details. Anton?
I was just wondering if you could put on the blackboard doctor's name or some information or a book or something you possibly recommend.
Anton, why don't you go grab the pen there? Get to see her. We'll study a little graphology here too. We'll check out Anton's handwriting. Okay, just erase a big chunk over there on the left somewhere. Louis, now, do you have the address in California? You don't have it with you, do you? Okay, shall we? Okay, Anton, the only address I have is the one on Maui, and if Dr. Whiteside has just passed on, that might not work anymore. So, Louis, will you make it a point to bring that in tomorrow, and we'll get it up on the board for you tomorrow, okay? Thank you, Anton. The book that you'll want to get is called Face Language 2. Face Language 2 by Dr. Robert Whiteside. But we'll get you the address there. Like Roman numeral 2. Roman numeral 2. How's she doing there? Good? All righty. Now, let's see another one. Tana? Let's check out your nose here. That one from the side there. Oh, that's not too bad. Here's another one that's pretty. See, the thing to realize is most of these personality traits are in the face. So a tremendous amount of them are ones that you can see without any trouble because they're around the eyes, the nose, the mouth, that sort of thing. A major trait that you want to look at is look at the person in profile and look at the slope of the nose. You know how you have some people, when you look at them in profile, it's a good... Let's see your nose from the side. No, that's a little bit of one, but you know how you get some people with a real ski slope nose? Maggie's got a classic. It scoops out like that, okay? And then you get another person whose nose is going to be the opposite, where it's like a real Roman nose, bridges out like that. Those are going to be extremes. Those would be extremes, okay? Well, actually, mine's about a 60th percentile, so it's not that extreme. You'll see some people whose nose goes like twice as far out, where it's a real extreme. If you're like in the 40th to 60th percentile, somewhere in that ballpark, it's like, it's a bell curve. It's no big deal. You're really not all that extreme on that trait. It's the ones that have a real extreme on one trait that that's where you gotta be careful. You get a person with what's that? Yes. You get a person with the real scoopity nose. That's a person who's very programmed to help other people. Their tendency is going to be always to look out for the other person first. So, for example, if you're like lost someplace and you need directions, who do you ask? You just look around and find somebody with a good scoopity nose because they'll help you out. You get somebody whose nose goes the other way, they'll look out for themselves first. They're happy to take care of other people, but they're definitely going to make sure they're covered first. Yeah, don't ask them directions unless they... But these are just little things. But the bottom line is I would strongly recommend you study the personology get one of the basic books, because even just if you can learn like 10 or 15 basic traits that you can see in the face, this is going to make a world of difference in terms of how you interact with the people that you're dealing with. And if you're any sort of practitioner, you're going to recognize that you're going to, you can learn just by looking at a person's face and sizing up a few basic details. You can immediately learn stuff that would take you maybe hours to figure out just in talking to that person. And that's going to be tremendously helpful for you in dealing with that person. Best thing about healing crises is you can never schedule them. There. Yeah. Okay, we'll hit a few more slides here. Vivian, question.
Is there any other book, Doug, besides the one you mentioned that's good? Because I think Wolf said he couldn't get that or something. Yeah.
There, if we get the address from Lewis tomorrow on the Personology Institute, there was a book that was available a few years back that was called, and I don't remember the author's name, it wasn't Dr. Whiteside, but there was a book that was called Personology Traits Visualized. And that was a really, really simple one because it just had nice illustrations of like the extremes and very, very brief descriptions of the traits and that sort of thing. But the face language, too, you should be able to get. We got copies of it just in September, right? He's got a whole bunch of other stuff. Will you bring that in, Louis? Okay. Okay. What you'll find is that there will probably be, if you write away to the Personology Institute, you might well be able to find a certified personologist in your area. It's quite likely, because I know the original book by Dr. Whiteside was translated into I think like 14 languages or something like that. So it is something that has gone around the world. So you might find one, and if you ever get the chance, I would strongly recommend you get a personology reading. It's quite you learn a lot about yourself from it. Lewis. Now, do you know any place where people could crash around there? Oh, okay. Alrighty, we'll get the lights again. You got that little place out back. It'll fit a few. Okay, let's get the next one here, Matthew. Okay, well, I'm not quite sure if that's a left eye or right eye from where I'm sitting. Does that look like a left eye there? Okay, so what do we got in this area? Black spot in where? So what might we not want to do? Or, okay, so adjustments or point holding in the back might be a fairly bad idea. So what does this? What's the obvious here that we ought to say anyways? No. But besides that, what do you do in your point holding group? You check the eyes of everybody, whether they're holding points or getting their points held, and you want to be very thorough about it, because you want to make sure you're not missing the obvious here. Okay, next slide. Good question. Who would like to answer that? Question was, why do you check the point holders? Brooke? Come on up. Bring the little dude.
Because what happens is, whether you're holding points or whether you're having your points being held, either you can still go through a lot of healing, you can still come up scale to the level of pain and unconsciousness. And if you've got a spot like this and you're holding points, you come up scale, you're not on the program, you don't know anything about it, you go back home, pretty soon what can happen? Cancer can grow, can accelerate, so it's really, really important to check everybody. And it's also important just to realise that, don't just let any old person hold points in your group. That everybody should be educated as to what it's all about and the reasons why. So have a good look at everybody's eyes.
So the reason you would look at at the point holder's eyes, would you, if you saw this in a point holder's eyes, would you then not let them hold points? Is that the reason?
You'd want to make sure they got on a real good nutritional program, because you don't want to run the risk of them getting up into that hyperactivity of the gonads and not having the proteolytic enzymes and the Schweitzer and everything else that they need to make sure that they're not going to get knocked off by it.
So basically you want to check the point holder's eyes to decide whether or not to let them hold points.
It's a good idea. Now, frankly, in point holding groups and seminars, it doesn't always get done. It's a big job. You get a group this size. I mean, I certainly haven't looked at every single eye here, so it doesn't always get done. But I'm just saying it would certainly be best if we had a good look at everybody before we did it. Hopefully that's getting done out at the local level in the point holding groups, and people are having a good understanding of where they're at. No problem a person holding points or getting held who's got serious stuff going on in the eye. There's no problem them doing that as long as they're what?
Nutritionally prepared.
Right, as long as they're well prepared nutritionally and they're going to remain well prepared nutritionally. Because one of the worst things that can happen is a person comes upscale just enough to where the cancer starts growing, and then they stop, and then they get stuck at that level.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure it wasn't that you were going to try to assign points accordingly, because it doesn't matter where you're plugged in, you could still activate that, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
You want to say something, AJ?
I mean, just consider this. How many of you have gone into healing crises just holding points? Quite a few already. So, Karen will have to raise a hand a few times. Yeah. I mean, how many? Well, let's go further than that. How many of you have gone into healing crisis just watching people go into healing crisis? So just start to think about that and realize that we're playing with something rather powerful here. We're playing with something quite powerful here. You ever notice how when it rains, all the snakes come out? How's she doing there? Okay, we got a left or a right eye here. Okay, we got a left eye, so what might we be dealing with right in this area? So it's a left eye, so this is going to be over medial. Okay, or prostate would be prostate, uterus, or actually also out into the vagina or penis would be a possibility. If you look at your eye chart there in a left eye, from roughly about 6:15 to about 7, you have a lot of different things that are possible in that area. And although I did say earlier, when you hear hoofbeats, think horses, not zebras, consider there's a lot of stuff in that area. You might be dealing with stuff with the rectum and the anus. You might be dealing with the bladder. You might be dealing with the perineum. There's a lot of different things that are all quite close to each other on the eye chart. Now, another thing you want to consider here, which we're going to get into a little bit later on with some of the slides, but you also start to have to look at some of the bones that are in these areas, because people obviously do get problems in the pelvis, the hips, and other things. And this isn't always that clear in the eye chart because of the 3D overlays. So we're going to get into the bone charts probably sometime tomorrow, and if not then, well, some other time, I guess. But we want to look at a lot of other possibilities. Now, do you see any other black spots or brown spots here? How about right out in this area? Now, what might that be right there? Okay, where does the spine show up? Okay, the spine's going to show up approximately like this. So what's a very strong possibility for that? Might be out in the tailbone there. Okay? Let's get the next one there, Matthew. Yeah, mold. Okay, I'd say probably the main thing in this area is you're probably dealing with either... actually, according to John's notes, I think this is a This is actually a cancer of the esophagus right here. And you'll notice if you look in this area very carefully, you've got some very, very dark holes down in between the fibers. And how do the fibers look? Yeah, you look like you probably do have a bit of it's a little bit blurry out here, but it does look like you actually have the asparagus effect. And as far as I know, this is a slide of a person with the esophageal cancer here, cancer of the esophagus. Okay, next slide. Okay, what number is this one here, Matthew? This is 60. Oh, okay, actually, let's go back to that. Let's go back to that slide before. Go to the one we had before. Okay, this is actually my mistake. This is actually the vocal cords. It's actually in the trachea and the vocal cords there, which is pretty much exactly where it would be on the eye chart. Okay, let's go to that next one now. Okay, where do we have a problem? Where do we have a serious problem here? Well, the heart would certainly be something to look at, but we've got quite right, probably a bit of a doubling in there, but we've also got quite a problem in this person's leg, because notice how you've got kind of a quite a black hole in there with some of the swollen fibers going through it, and you've got this lesion right here. In this particular case, it is actually leg. It is actually leg. How are we doing back there, hon? Yeah? Out of the woods there? Alrighty. Good. Carry on. Come on up when you're done, but hang out if you need to. Okay, let's get the next one. Yeah. Let's just go on to the next one there. Okay, what do we got in this area? Quite likely something right in the leg there. Certainly right at 6 o'clock there. Yeah, that would be the. Oh, okay. In this individual, one of the symptoms this individual had was was problems in the thigh where the muscles were like kind of like all rock hard, like it was just unusually hard in that area. Quite possibly some sort of cancer in there. I don't have the rest of the story up here, but obviously we're dealing with the thigh there. Let's hit the next one. Okay, well, you'll note a lot of the radii solaris up in the brain area. Now, where's this one going to be? Okay, Animation Life Center. And what do you also got kind of coming in through that area? You got some nerve rings. So what is this individual's response to stress going to be? Okay, a lot of depression, a lot of ups and downs. And besides the emotional response, what might be the physical response to stress? Okay, with the Animation Life Center, you have not just the emotional ups and downs, but what do you have physically? Okay, same thing. You got the ups and the downs physically. So under stress, what's this individual what might the pattern be? You might have some pretty severe ups and downs. They might go, and then do what? Totally drop. Have to spend 3 or 4 days in bed because you're going to have a lot of swings in the amount of physical energy. Sometimes very, very rapid swings from one day to the next, where you've got all sorts of energy one day and nothing the next day. Now, you're dealing there with hyperactivities, which are overactivities, and underactivities, the hypoactivities. What's the long-term trend going to be? Where are you going to go in the long run with something like that? You're going to go down. You're going to go to the underactivity. So the long-term tendency is going to be depression and fatigue, right? So what's going to happen when you reverse things and a person gets on a good program? Well, what are they going to go through, though? They're going to go through some severe swings. They're going to go through lots of ups and downs. Now, might that be helpful to the person to know that in advance? Okay, so these are some things you might want to keep in your tool belt there for your iridology readings, and of course you might want to apply them to yourself first and foremost. I'd recommend in particular you all check yourself out very, very thoroughly up between 11 and 1, and notice any of these areas up in the brain where you've got radii solaris, pigment spots, any of these other types of markings. And then wherever you find them, go read up on that in the Jensen on the flare cards where you've got that in your photocopying. And this will help you to understand a lot of your psychological type things and a lot of the other symptoms that you've probably had in the past and that you'll probably get in the future, particularly during healing crisis. Okay, next one. Go, please do.
Could you possibly explain all these markings between 11 o'clock and 1 o'clock, things like ego pressure, five sense area, what they actually mean?
It's a very, very big subject, Elaine. These are not structural parts of the brain. They're functional parts of the brain. You all know what I mean. This relates to function, and they all have fairly long type definitions where there's a lot of different possibilities there. If you read up in Jensen's description of these, there is a lot of overlap between some of the different areas. There is a certain amount, like mental ability and inherent mental. There will be a fair amount of overlap there. But if you start to really, hone in on some of the key terms in there, and with a little practice, especially looking at yourself and people you know, you eventually will come to a pretty good understanding of a lot of these different areas. Like acquired mental speech, for example, can relate to things like stuttering and stammering and dyslexia and things of that nature. So you start to try to hone in on the basics on each one of these, and that's a study in itself. Come on up, Graham. How's she doing there?
Just kind of wondering, in the between 11 and 1 in the iris there, in the head area, in the left eye, that relates to the other side of the body.
Oh, good question. Okay.
But what I was going to say as a result of that was, because they relate to opposite sides of the body, does that affect the yin-yang aspect of it as well?
There's a lot of crossover there. What Graham is referring to is this. Overall, for the most part, your left brain... We'll get the lights on here for a second. Overall, for the most part, what side of the body is controlled by your left brain? Okay, your right side of the body. Your right brain overall tends to control the left side of the body. Now, in your iris, mainly, your left brain is going to show up in your left eye, and your right brain is going to show up in your right eye. So, for example, if I have neurological type deafness in my right ear, okay, where would I look? I'd look in the left eye, because if it's neurological deafness in the right ear, that's going to relate to which brain? It's going to relate to the left brain. So I'd look in the 5 sense area on the opposite side, on the left eye. Do y'all follow that? Now, if I have mechanical deafness in the right ear, say the bones are fused up, or I've had a surgery or something of that nature where it's mechanical in the right ear, where am I going to look? Okay, I'm going to look in the ear area in the right eye. So you've got that one crossover, but it does get a little bit trickier because apparently some of the left brain can also show up in the right eye, and to some degree the right brain can show up in the left eye. So you got a little bit of a crossover. So the main thing you really want to do is what? Check both sides. Check both sides, and then you'll be safe there, because it does get a little bit tricky. For the most part, left brain's in the left eye, right brain's in the right eye, but you do have some situations that will go the opposite. What's an obvious physical event that will show this for a lot of people? You get a person with a stroke. What happens if a person has a stroke on the right side of the brain? Left side of the body is messed up. They'll be dragging their leg and slurring the speech, and the facial muscles will be all, sagging down and so forth. Okay? So that's one thing. But if you see a person with a stroke, and it's the left side of the body that's affected, and then it's the right brain, so where are you going to look? You're going to start in the right eye, but you might as well check out the left eye. Check out the left eye as well, including the sclera. Let me get the slide. Some tape change.